Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a quiet American suburb in the middle of the 1950s, where the lawns are trimmed, the chrome toaster shines, and the woman responsible for maintaining this vision of domestic peace has already been awake for 40 minutes. It is still dark outside. The curtains are motionless, the wooden radio is silent, and the kitchen clock is approaching 6 with the confidence of an object that has never packed a lunchbox in its life. Somewhere upstairs, a husband sleeps beneath a neatly tucked blanket. 2 children occupy their rooms in the loose, sprawling manner of people who have no appointments with a frying pan. Downstairs, however, the day has begun. Coffee must be made, breakfast-timed clothing, checked lunches assembled, and several small disasters prevented before anyone else notices that disasters were possible. The popular image of the 1950s housewife often places her in a bright kitchen at 10 in the morning, smiling beside a new appliance. Tonight we're arriving earlier before the lipstick, before the cheerful apron, and before the room has been arranged to suggest that domestic order simply appeared overnight. Before we continue, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy these quiet journeys into the forgotten routines, hidden rules, and strange contradictions of old America. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there, and let me know the earliest hour anyone in your family regularly woke to keep the household moving. Was it a mother preparing breakfast, a father leaving for an early shift, a grandmother starting bread, or someone whose work was noticed only when it was not done? Many of these stories begin with your memories and suggestions, so keep them coming. Now dim the lights, pull the blanket a little higher, and let your shoulders relax. The modern kitchen can wait. The dishes are unlikely to organize a formal protest before morning. For the next little while we're going somewhere quieter, although not necessarily more restful, into a house where the day belongs first to the person who rises before anyone else, and belongs last to the person who checks the doors after everyone has gone to bed. What did an ordinary weekday morning actually require from a housewife in the middle of the decade? How early did she rise if her husband needed breakfast before catching a train or driving to work? How much food could be prepared the night before, and how much had to appear, fresh, hot, and perfectly timed? What happened when a child refused to wake, a shirt had not dried properly, or the milk bottle on the porch had frozen in winter? Could she sit down with her own coffee, or did sitting suggest that something had been forgotten? How carefully was fatigue hidden from the family? Why did a new washing machine promise freedom, while the standard for clean clothing quietly became more demanding? And at what point did a collection of small tasks become a full system of labor that everyone depended upon but few people described as work? Most importantly, what would happen to you, a visitor from the age of microwave breakfasts and snooze buttons, if you were expected to perform the entire routine without looking hurried, annoyed, or even slightly unconvinced by the moral importance of warm toast? Congratulations! You've just woken up in 1956. You're a married woman living in a modest suburban house within commuting distance of a growing American city. The alarm clock beside the bed has a metal bell, no glowing display, and no interest in negotiating with you. Your husband must leave shortly after 7. The children need to be dressed, fed, inspected, and pushed towards school with everything they were supposed to remember. The kitchen floor is linoleum. The refrigerator hums in the darkness, and a glass coffee percolator waits on the counter, beside a loaf of sliced bread wrapped in waxed paper. Your hair is still pinned from the night before. Your robe is thin. The floor is cold. No one has asked whether you slept well. The first requirement of the day is that the household must wake into comfort without witnessing the labor that created it. This is considered normal. You place both feet on the floor and discover that domestic perfection begins with a small act of personal betrayal, leaving a warm bed voluntarily. You move quietly through the hallway because waking the family too soon creates additional work. A loose floorboard near the children's room must be avoided, the bathroom door must be closed carefully, and the stairs require the cautious concentration of someone carrying classified information. In the kitchen, you switch on the light and immediately see what the darkness had kindly concealed. A saucepan from the night before is drying beside the sink. 2 crumbs remain beneath the bread box. A child's glass sits on the table with a pale ring of milk at the bottom. None of this is serious, but the morning has standards. You fill the percolator, measure the coffee, set it over the burner, and listen for the first watery sounds moving through the glass stem. The smell begins to spread through the room before the family does. Bacon or sausage may go into a heavy skillet. Eggs wait in a cardboard carton. Bread enters the toaster in batches because the machine has not yet been informed that 4 people prefer to eat simultaneously. You're not simply cooking. You're coordinating temperature, appetite, departure time, and the fragile public confidence of a family that assumes breakfast will exist. While the coffee bubbles, you check the clock again. Time behaves differently before sunrise. 5 minutes can hold a surprising number of obligations if none of them belong to you. You lay out plates, cups, knives, cereal bowls, napkins, sugar milk, and whatever condiment has become essential to one child's continued cooperation with civilization. You inspect the lunches started the night before, spreading sandwiches on waxed paper, trimming nothing unless the household budget permits such architectural luxury, and adding fruit that must be neither bruised nor too expensive. A thermos may need filling. A note from school may require a signature. Coins for milk or lunch must be found. Upstairs, a bed creaks, and you pause to identify which family member has begun moving. This is the first warning that the private preparation period is ending. In a few minutes, you must no longer look like a tired person standing over hot grease in a dim kitchen. You must become the calm centre of the morning, the woman who appears to have anticipated everything. The coffee is ready, the footsteps are getting closer, and before anyone reaches the table there is still the matter of the face the family is allowed to see. The face the family was allowed to see did not arrive naturally. It had to be assembled before breakfast, somewhere between the first hiss of bacon and the second call upstairs. You leave the kitchen for only a few minutes, carrying the smell of coffee and hot grease into the small bathroom where the mirror is beginning to fog at the edges. Your hair is still arranged in pin curls, each one held close to the scalp by a metal clip that has spent the night reminding you that beauty often begins with discomfort and remains committed to the principle until morning. The bathroom floor is colder than the kitchen linoleum, the overhead light is unkind, and the woman in the mirror looks less like an advertisement than the person who stayed awake calculating whether there was enough bread for 4 lunches. You remove the clips, carefully placing them in a dish. Then loosen the curls with your fingers and a brush. Too much brushing will destroy the shape. Too little will leave you resembling someone who has recently received alarming electrical news. The goal is soft, controlled, and presentable. Effort must disappear into the result. Hair was not a minor detail in the polished domestic image. It helped signal that a woman had herself under control, even if the kitchen clock, the children, and the household budget had formed a private alliance against her. Some women set their hair with dampened strands, pin curls, roller setting lotion, or trips to a beauty salon when time and money allowed. The precise routine varied with age, region, income, hair texture, personal taste, and the styles available in local magazines and salons. But the broader expectation was recognizable: hair should look intentional. A hurried ponytail might be practical, but practicality was not always the same thing as respectability. You stand beneath the bathroom light, arranging one curl near the temple, then another above the ear, lifting, smoothing, and securing the shape with invisible pins. The radio advertisements and magazine photographs rarely showed this stage, They showed the completed woman smiling beside a polished range as though her hair had formed itself in gratitude for modern domestic life. The metal clip's stiff neck and interrupted sleep were edited out. Advertising had excellent manners that way. It never mentioned what happened before the photograph. Your face receives a quicker treatment because the eggs cannot supervise themselves. Cold water, face cream powder, perhaps a little lipstick and enough attention to suggest wakefulness, without implying that you have spent 20 minutes manufacturing it. Cosmetics were not used by every woman in the same way, and many households had different standards about what was appropriate before breakfast, inside the home or in public. Yet in the popular middle-class ideal, a wife was often encouraged to appear neat and refreshed rather than visibly exhausted. You apply lipstick lightly, blot it against a folded piece of tissue and study the result. The colour has to survive coffee without announcing itself on the rim of the cup like evidence from a minor crime. Powder softens the shine across the forehead. A touch of rouge may restore the impression that your circulation has not been defeated by the hour. The transformation is modest but meaningful. You're not dressing for a party. You're preparing to enter your own kitchen where no guests are expected, and everyone already knows what you look like. Apparently familiarity was no excuse for looking familiar. Then comes the question of clothing. The robe that carried you downstairs is useful for darkness, but daylight has begun to gather at the windows and the family is moving. You return to the bedroom and choose a house dress practical enough for cooking and cleaning, but tidy enough to survive the possibility of a delivery man neighbour, school visitor, or unexpected knock at the door. The fabric may be cotton, perhaps printed with small flowers or checks, with buttons down the front and a waist that creates a respectable shape. Underneath it, depending on the woman and the household, there may be a brassiere, a slip or a foundation garment more structured than anything a modern sleeper would willingly approach before sunrise. Stockings are unnecessary for the kitchen, but bare legs may still feel too informal once errands begin. Shoes matter too. Soft slippers are comfortable, but they can make you look as though you have surrendered. Low-heeled house shoes are less forgiving, yet they complete the impression of readiness. The household has not asked for a fashion performance. It has simply arranged the rules so that not performing one feels like failure. As you fasten the dress, you hear a child call from the hallway, followed by the unmistakable sound of a drawer being opened with excessive confidence. Someone cannot find a sock. Someone else has remembered that a paper needs signing. Your husband asks whether the coffee is ready, though the smell has already reached the stairs and could probably answer on your behalf. This is the moment when appearance becomes part of household management. You step into the hallway with your hair arranged, your dress buttoned and your expression composed. No one sees the clips in the dish, the cold floor, or the hurried lipstick. They see the person who knows where the missing sock might be. You guide one child back toward the bedroom, sign the paper against the wall, and call down that breakfast is nearly ready. The calm voice is important. A visibly flustered mother could make the morning feel unstable, and the family's comfort often depended on her ability to absorb disorder without reflecting it. You were expected to be the emotional wallpaper, pleasant, dependable, and rarely the reason anyone noticed the room. The contradiction was not that every woman hated these rituals. Many enjoyed fashion cosmetics, salon visits, and the private satisfaction of arranging themselves carefully. A house dress could be comfortable. A favourite lipstick could lift the mood. A well-set hairstyle could feel skilled, expressive, and entirely one's own. The problem came when pleasure hardened into obligation, when looking tired was treated as a personal lapse rather than the predictable result of labour, and when effort had to be hidden to counter successful femininity. You smooth the skirt once returned to the kitchen and rescue the bacon just before it crosses from crisp into archaeological evidence. The children arrive in stages. Your husband unfolds the newspaper. Cups are filled, plates are set down, and nobody remarks on your hair because the morning is functioning as expected. That is the reward for doing it correctly. The work becomes invisible. You sit for perhaps half a minute, raise the coffee to your lips and discover that it has already begun to cool. Across the table, someone asks for toast. The face is ready. Now the performance can begin. Breakfast was not simply the first meal of the day. It was the opening performance staged under fluorescent light with a ticking wall clock and an audience that had no idea rehearsals began before dawn. The table must appear ready before anyone sits down, which means the cereal bowls are placed where small hands can reach them. The coffee cup rests beside the folded newspaper, and the butter has been softened just enough to spread without tearing the toast into fragments. Eggs continue cooking while one child argues with a shoelace, and another studies the contents of a lunchbox as though conducting a customs inspection. Your husband enters dressed for work, carrying the faint smell of shaving soap, and assuming not cruelly but confidently that breakfast has been waiting for him rather than racing toward him. The skillet hisses. The percolator gives one final bubbling complaint. A chair scrapes against the linoleum. You move between stove and table, carrying plates with both hands, careful not to wrinkle the calm expression prepared upstairs. Hot food is not enough. It must arrive together, look intentional, and leave sufficient time for everyone else to depart comfortably. A family breakfast could contain affection, conversation, and genuine pleasure. It could also resemble a railway timetable operated by one person who is not permitted to miss a connection. You place eggs before your husband, cereal before the children, and toast in a rack or on a warmed plate, because cold bread has apparently chosen to oppose the domestic order. The timing is delicate. If the toast is made too early, it stiffens. If it is made too late, someone waits. If the eggs remain in the skillet while you search for a missing permission slip, their edges become crisp, which may be acceptable unless the person eating them has developed a firm opinion about eggs before 7 in the morning. You refill the milk glass past the sugar wipe a small spill and listen to 3 conversations at once. One child has forgotten a library book. The other dislikes the way the jam has touched the crust. Your husband mentions that he may be late for dinner, then changes the subject before you can reorganize the evening aloud. You absorb this information while checking the clock and turning the second batch of toast. The family experiences breakfast as a series of objects appearing at the correct moment. You experience it as traffic control. The distinction matters. A smoothly run household often made labor look like atmosphere, something warm and natural that rose with the smell of coffee and required no visible human machinery. The menu itself carried expectations shaped by income region, family habit, work schedules, and the expanding world of packaged food. Some households served eggs, bacon, sausage, oatmeal, toast canned or fresh fruit and coffee. Others relied on cold cereal, reheated biscuits, leftovers or whatever could be prepared quickly before an early factory shift or long commute. There was no single universal breakfast, and many women worked outside the home as well as inside it, compressing domestic labor into even narrower hours. Yet the promoted ideal remained generous, a properly nourished family beginning the day under the supervision of a composed wife and mother. Advertisements praised convenience, but convenience rarely meant that expectations became smaller. A quicker cereal could be accompanied by sliced fruit. An electric toaster saved attention for the eggs. A refrigerator kept milk cold so that more items could be stored, planned, and served. The machine did save time, but the saved time was immediately approached by another task and asked to identify itself. You open the refrigerator for orange juice and notice that the shelf needs wiping. You close it again. That problem belongs to the version of you who exists after everyone leaves. Your own breakfast occupies a more uncertain position. There is a plate for you technically, although it remains near the stove while you carry other plates to the table. You take a bite of toast while standing. Then you sit and someone asks for more milk. You rise, pour it, sit again, and remember the sandwiches that still need wrapping. The coffee reaches your mouth in brief intervals and becomes cooler each time a beverage gradually transformed from comfort into evidence. No formal rule says that the wife must eat last or eat standing, and many families shared work more evenly than the stereotype suggests. But when one person is responsible for monitoring the entire meal, her own hunger becomes the easiest part of the schedule to postpone. This is how invisible labour often feels from inside not one dramatic sacrifice, but a sequence of tiny deferrals. Your toast can wait, your coffee can cool, your chair can remain empty for another minute. Everyone loves you, and you may love serving them. Affection does not prevent the eggs from overcooking. It simply gives you another reason to keep moving. Conversation adds a second performance. The morning should feel encouraging rather than tense, especially for the husband preparing to face work and the children preparing for school. A complaint about the budget, a household repair, or your own exhaustion may be perfectly real, but breakfast is rarely considered the ideal moment to introduce it. You ask whether the meeting is today. You remind a child about a spelling test. You react appropriately to a newspaper headline without revealing that you have heard only half of it. The front page forms a small wall across one side of the table, offering your husband a private space even while the family gathers around him. You occupy no such wall. Your attention remains public property. A dropped spoon, an untied shoe, a worried expression, or an untouched bowl immediately enters your jurisdiction. Emotional management is mixed with food service so completely that it is difficult to separate the two. You're not merely feeding the family. You're adjusting the temperature of the room, smoothing irritation before it becomes an argument, and creating the reassuring impression that the day is beginning properly. The coffee may be strong. The atmosphere must remain mild. Then the clock advances and breakfast changes from a meal into an evacuation. Chairs move back. Napkins are abandoned. Your husband drains the last of his coffee and checks his watch. One child suddenly remembers a form that requires money. Another announces that the missing library book may be beneath the bed, which is information of limited value at this stage of operations. You retrieve coins from a kitchen drawer, wrap the last sandwich brush crumbs from a collar, and call toward the hallway for someone to put on a coat. The newspaper folds, a brief kiss is exchanged, instructions are given about dinner errands or a possible visitor. The front door opens, releasing a strip of cold morning air into the house, and for several seconds the hallway fills with shoes, lunch boxes, wool impatience and farewells. Then the door closes. The car starts or footsteps move toward the station. The house becomes quiet with startling speed. You stand in the kitchen surrounded by the remains of an event everyone else has finished. 4 cups, several plates, a sticky spoon, eggshells, crumbs grease a damp dishcloth, and one final piece of toast sit beneath the brightening window. Your own coffee is cold now. You drink it anyway. Breakfast has ended for the family, but for you it has only changed form. The dishes must be washed, leftovers put away, the stove wiped, the table cleared, the floor inspected, and the room restored before the next task can officially begin. No one applauds a breakfast that arrives on time. They simply leave with full stomachs and the belief that the morning went smoothly. That belief is the finished product. You carry the first stack of plates toward the sink, and upstairs behind a half-open bedroom door, a missing shoe is waiting to become the next emergency. The morning departure did not happen when everyone stood up from breakfast. It happened in waves, each one carrying a new object that had vanished sometime during the night. A lunchbox sat open on the counter, its metal lid waiting beside 2 sandwiches wrapped in waxed paper, an apple polished against your apron, and a small package of cookies that must look generous without exhausting the weekly supply by Tuesday. One child's coat hangs neatly by the door. The other coat is on the banister beneath a scarf, a school paper, and what appears to be one mitten from 3 different pairs. Somewhere upstairs, a bedroom drawer is being opened and closed with growing violence. The missing shoe has not returned to civilization. You leave the dishes in the sink and climb the stairs, passing framed family photographs that suggest these children have always been clean coordinated and willing to stand still. The bedroom offers a different historical record. A blanket trails onto the floor. Comic books lean against a chair. A sweater has been turned inside out by methods that appear experimental. You kneel and look beneath the bed where dust, a marble, 2 pencils, and the missing shoe have formed a small independent republic. The shoe is retrieved. Peace negotiations continue. Getting a child ready for school required more than clothing the child. You are also preparing a small public representative of the household. Shirts should be reasonably clean collars, straight hair, brushed hands, washed buttons present, and shoes tied in a manner unlikely to collapse before the first bell. The standards varied enormously by family, community, income, race, region, school, and personal temperament, but one expectation appeared often enough to become familiar. A child's appearance reflected on the mother. A wrinkled shirt did not merely suggest that a shirt was wrinkled. It might suggest disorganization, carelessness, poor housekeeping, or a mysterious decline in family standards that could apparently begin with one loose button. You pull a comb through resistant hair, while the child bends sideways to avoid it, then smooth the collar and inspect a small stain that was invisible until this exact moment. There is no time to change the shirt. A damp cloth, a little soap, and concentrated optimism must do. The child complains that the collar feels wet. You explain that it will dry. This is not reassurance. It is a production deadline. The lunchboxes require their own inspection because school lunch is domestic competence sent into public view. A teacher may see it. Other children will certainly see it. The contents must survive several hours without refrigeration remain affordable, and avoid becoming the reason your child returns home, announcing that someone else received a better dessert. Peanut butter, cheese sliced meat, egg salad, fruit crackers, or homemade cake might appear depending on the household and what was available. Thermos bottles could carry soup milk or another drink, though they also introduced the possibility of leaks with the strategic reach of an international incident. You wrap each item carefully, fold the wax paper, secure it with tape or a neat crease, and place the heavier objects below the fragile ones. A napkin goes inside. Coins for milk are placed where they will not disappear into the same pocket currently containing stringer bottle cap and something the child refuses to identify. This is nutrition budgeting, packaging, and social diplomacy conducted before 8 in the morning. The lunchbox closes with a metallic snap. It looks simple now. That is how successful preparation usually ends. The complexity vanishes, leaving behind a sandwich. At the front door, the household briefly becomes a weather station. Is it cold enough for the heavier coat? Has the rain stopped? Will the afternoon be warmer? A mother without a forecasting department must make the decision using the sky, the radio, and the suspicious statement of a child who insists that nobody else will be wearing a hat. You fasten one coat, reject an unconvincing attempt to leave without gloves, and tuck a scarf inside rather than allowing it to trail dramatically near bicycle spokes. School books are gathered. A pencil case is found. The signed permission slip, which spent breakfast hidden beneath the newspaper, is inserted into the correct folder. Then comes the final verbal inventory. lunchbox books, homework, milk money, handkerchief gloves. The children answer yes with the calm confidence of people who have not checked. You check for them. One lunchbox remains on the kitchen counter. One glove is still inside a coat sleeve. The library book, after a frantic search beneath the bed, turns out to be beside the front door under the morning paper. The house has developed a sense of humour. You do not encourage it. Departure time also carried a quiet emotional burden. Children could be nervous about a test, embarrassed by clothing, worried about a classmate, or simply unwilling to leave the warm house. Yet the morning schedule allowed little room for long investigation. You learned to read faces while buttoning coats. A child who moved too slowly might be tired, frightened, or merely fascinated by a loose thread. You had perhaps 30 seconds to decide. A reassuring word, a reminder to speak with the teacher, a quick touch on the shoulder, and the problem was sent into the school day with the child. In many families, mothers became the first receivers of these worries, and the last people permitted to be slowed by them. You were expected to notice everything without allowing what you noticed to disrupt the clock. Affection had to operate efficiently. The bus would not wait because someone had developed a complicated feeling near the hat rack. You open the door, straighten one final collar, and watch the children move down the walk toward the bus stop or neighborhood school. They turn back once. You wave as though the morning has been calm. For a moment only your husband remains to launch. His departure may be more orderly, but it carries its own list of details. Hat, overcoat, briefcase, keys, train schedule, perhaps a lunch, carried in a plain bag or a metal box prepared alongside the children's. He may ask whether a shirt will be ready for tomorrow, whether a bill has been paid, or whether you can telephone someone during the day. None of these requests seems unreasonable alone. They arrive, however, at the edge of a schedule already crowded with washing, shopping, cleaning, cooking, correspondence, school concerns, and whatever the telephone may decide to deliver. You remember the requests because remembering is part of the job. A handwritten note goes beside the bread box or into a small household notebook. He kisses you goodbye, steps into the cool morning and moves toward work where his labour will have a title hours and perhaps a paycheck. Your labour remains inside the house, where its schedule expands to fill the day, and its success will be measured largely by the absence of visible failure. The front door closes for the final time and the silence feels almost luxurious. No one is asking for toast. No drawer is being searched. No shoelace has declared independence. You stand in the hallway among the faint smells of coffee wool coats, floor polish, and the cold air left behind by the open door. For perhaps 10 seconds nothing moves. Then you notice the damp footprints across the floor, the breakfast dishes waiting in the kitchen, the unmade beds upstairs, and the laundry basket beside the basement steps. The departure operation is complete, but it has left evidence everywhere. You hang the abandoned scarf, return a chair to its place, and carry the forgotten cereal bowl toward the sink. Outside, the family has entered the official portion of its day. Inside, you're about to begin the work that will make the morning disappear before they return. The kitchen after breakfast did not look like the beginning of a work day. It looked like the aftermath of one. Plates leaned against cups in the sink. Bacon grease cooled in the skillet, cereal softened in a shallow pool of milk, and a small constellation of crumbs marked every place a child had briefly occupied. The room was quiet now, but it was not resting. It was waiting for you. You tie the apron more securely, roll back your sleeves, and begin restoring the scene before the evidence dries into something more permanent. Leftovers must be covered. The butter returned to the refrigerator. Coffee grounds, emptied milk wiped from the table, and the skillet cleaned without sending grease directly into the drain unless you enjoy future plumbing negotiations. The family has gone out into the world believing breakfast ended when they left the table. for your breakfast ends when the kitchen no longer admits that breakfast happened. This is the first great illusion of the domestic day. A task is considered finished only after the work required to erase it has also been finished. You fill the sink with hot water and add soap flakes or liquid detergent depending on what the household uses and what the weekly budget allows. Steam lifts against the window while plates disappear beneath the suds. Washing dishes by hand is not complicated, which is precisely why it is so easy for everyone else to imagine that it takes no time. Scrape, soak, wash, rinse, drain, dry stack, repeat. Cups first, then plates, then utensils, then the greasy pans that wait at the end like senior officials who have declined to join the ordinary queue. The water becomes cloudy. A knife slips beneath the foam. A dish towel grows damp and begins leaving lint on the glassware, requiring you to polish the same tumbler twice, because apparently the breakfast dishes have developed standards of presentation. Some homes had mechanical dishwashers by the 1950s, but they were far from universal, and even where one existed, loading-unloading, scraping, storing, and cleaning the machine did not vanish. Convenience usually arrived as a new employee who required supervision. In your kitchen, the employee is you. Once the dishes are arranged in the cupboards, the room still refuses to call itself clean. The stove bears a fine spray of grease. The toaster has released crumbs into a tray that must be emptied. A sticky ring remains where the jam jar stood, and the refrigerator handle carries the faint print of a child who approached breakfast with jam already on both hands. You dampen a cloth wipe the enamel surface, rinse the cloth and wipe it again. Cleaning products were increasingly marketed as modern tools of efficiency, often accompanied by images of cheerful women defeating dirt with scientific confidence. Powders, waxes, polishes, bleaches, soaps and disinfectants promised brighter kitchens with less effort. The promises were not entirely false. Many products worked well. The difficulty was that every improvement in cleaning power seemed to produce a corresponding improvement in what counted as clean. A surface that once needed to be serviceable could now be expected to shine. Chrome must gleam, glass must be streakless, and the floor should ideally suggest that nobody has ever walked across it, despite the unfortunate design feature of being a floor. The table comes next. You shake crumbs from the cloth, wipe the wood, or laminate and inspect the legs where a splash of milk has travelled farther than physics should reasonably permit. Chairs are pushed back into position. Salt and pepper return to their proper place. The sugar bowl receives a clean spoon. A clean room is not only sanitary, it is arranged. The arrangement matters because the kitchen is a working space that must also be ready to become a social space without warning. A neighbour may stop by for coffee. A delivery man may come to the back door. A child may bring home a friend. Someone from church may telephone and mention that she is in the neighbourhood, a phrase capable of producing immediate movement in houses across America. The room therefore cannot merely function. It must be prepared to represent you. A disordered kitchen could be interpreted as a temporary inconvenience, but in communities where women's homes were closely observed, it might also be read as evidence about discipline, character, marriage, or the general condition of civilization. The counter has crumbs. Clearly the Republic is in danger. Then you turn toward the floor. Breakfast has left sugar crystals, toast crumbs, a pale crescent of dried milk, and those damp footprints from the hallway, each one waiting beneath the strengthening morning light. You sweep first, guiding the debris into a small pile that somehow contains more matter than the entire breakfast appeared to produce. Then comes the damp cloth or mop. Linoleum was praised for being practical and easy to maintain, which meant it was durable enough to be cleaned frequently, and visible enough to make frequent cleaning seem necessary. You move the chairs, reach beneath the table, and bend toward the corners where dust gathers with the confidence of something paying rent. The cold surface presses through the soles of your shoes. Your back begins to tighten. No single motion is severe, but domestic work has a way of repeating modest movements until the body begins keeping its own account. Bend, lift, twist. Carry, scrub. The motions rarely look dramatic, they simply return. As you work, the kitchen creates a list for the rest of the day. The refrigerator shelf you noticed earlier should be wiped. The bread supply is low. The dish towel needs washing. The sugar tin will not last the week. Dinner ingredients must be checked before the grocery trip. A small stain on the wall behind the chair needs attention, though perhaps not now. Household labour is not only the task in front of you, it is the constant noticing of future tasks. The family may see a clean table, but you see how much polish remains, whether the napkins need ironing, which cup has developed a crack, and how many meals can be created from what remains in the icebox or refrigerator. This mental inventory has no visible weight, yet it follows you from room to room. Forgetting one item can produce a missing dinner ingredient, a child without clean clothes, or a husband discovering at 7 a.m. that no shirt is ready. Remembering everything produces no event at all. That is the peculiar reward of competent household management. The better it works, the less anyone notices that management exists. There could be real satisfaction in this work. The warm dishes stacked neatly, the polished counter, the fresh smell of soap and the sudden calm of an orderly room could offer a sense of completion that many jobs never provide. A woman might take pride in a kitchen she had chosen arranged and learned to manage efficiently. She might enjoy the privacy after the family left the radio playing softly, and the freedom to create her own rhythm for a few hours. But satisfaction did not make the labour effortless, and pride did not mean the standards were freely chosen. The problem was not that women cared for their homes. It was that so much care was assumed, so much skill was described as instinct, and so much time disappeared beneath the simple phrase "she kept house." You straighten the last chair, hang the damp cloth, and stand for a moment in the restored kitchen. The surfaces shine. The breakfast has vanished. Anyone entering now might imagine the room has been quiet all morning. Then, from beside the basement steps comes the next reminder. The laundry basket is full. One child's shirt still carries yesterday's grass stain, and the sheets have reached the day assigned to them in the household schedule. The kitchen is clean, which means you may now leave it to begin another job. The machine downstairs has been advertised as a miracle of modern freedom. It waits with a heavy lid, a rubber hose, and several hours of your personal attention. The second shift is over. The third is ready. The washing machine was supposed to save your time. It did in much the same way a new highway saved time by encouraging everyone to travel farther. At the foot of the basement stairs, the laundry basket waits with shirts, socks, underclothes, dish towels, pillowcases, children's clothes, and a set of sheets that seem to have gained weight overnight. The basement is cooler than the kitchen, with a concrete floor, exposed pipes, shelves of canned goods, and the faint combined smell of soap. Damp fabric furnace dust and whatever the house stored here, because nobody wanted to look at it upstairs. Depending on the family's income, and when the equipment was purchased, the machine might be a modern automatic washer, a semi-automatic model, or an older wringer washer that still demands careful handling. Some households rely on a shared laundry room, a commercial laundromat, or hand washing for delicate items. Your machine is impressive by the standards of an earlier generation. It can agitate clothes without requiring you to scrub every garment against a washboard. It cannot sort them, examine stains, carry water, measure soap lift, wet sheets, hang them, fold them, iron them, mend them, or remember that your husband needs a clean white shirt tomorrow. The miracle has boundaries. Before anything enters the machine, the laundry must be divided. Whites in one pile, colours in another, delicate fabrics kept apart, heavily soiled work or play clothes given special attention. A red sock hidden among pale garments can alter the family wardrobe with a confidence usually reserved for major fashion designers. Pockets must be checked for coins, pencils, bits of paper, chewing gum, and small objects whose purpose the children will later insist was essential. Buttons are inspected, tears are noticed. Shirt collars and cuffs receive extra soap because ordinary washing may not remove the grey line left by a day of wear. Grass stains, grease, food, and ink each demand their own small negotiation. You rub soap into one knee, soak a handkerchief, and place a stained shirt aside for another attempt. Laundry is rarely a single activity. It is diagnosis followed by treatment, conducted without a laboratory, and with the understanding that failure will be worn publicly by someone you love. A clean collar reflects care. A stain can become evidence that the household system has faltered. The shirt has no opinion on the matter, but society has kindly provided one. If the washer has a wringer, your attention cannot wander. The rollers squeeze water from the clothes, saving the effort of twisting each garment by hand. But they also demand respect from fingers, loose hair sleeves, and anything else that enters too closely. You feed the fabric through carefully guiding a shirt, then a towel, then the long wet body of a sheet that appears determined to wrap itself around your arms. Some machines include safety releases, but caution remains part of the routine. A child calling from upstairs, a ringing telephone, or a pot left heating in the kitchen can divide your attention at exactly the wrong moment. Even an automatic machine does not release you completely. Water temperature must suit the fabric. The correct amount of detergent matters. Too little leaves dirt behind. Too much may produce residue, excessive suds, or another rinse. The machine shakes and churns with industrial conviction, suggesting that great progress is occurring. You stand beside it, sorting the next load. Labour has been saved, but not necessarily returned to you. It has been reorganised into supervision preparation and a new expectation that the family's clothing should now be cleaner more often. Wet laundry is heavier than dry laundry and much less cooperative. You gather the first load into a basket that presses against your hip, then carry it toward the yard or basement drying area. Electric and gas clothes dryers existed during the decade, but many families did not own one, and the clothesline remained a familiar part of household life. Outside, the morning air has warmed slightly. The lawn is still damp, neighbouring windows reflect the pale sky, and a row of wooden clothespins waits in a small bag attached to the line. You shake each item before hanging it, straighten seams, pull wrinkles from collars, and arrange the fabric so that air can move through it. Sheets require space. Shirts should hang in a way that reduces later ironing. Underclothes may be placed where they're less visible from the street because even the laundry has been assigned a modesty code. The line begins to fill with pale fabric moving in the breeze. It is a satisfying sight, clean and orderly, but it is also public. A neighbour can see how often you wash, how white the sheets appear, where the clothing is patched, and perhaps more about the family's private life than anyone intended to display between two poles. Weather now becomes your supervisor. A cloud gathers beyond the rooftops, and you study it with the seriousness of a farmer protecting a harvest. Rain can undo the morning's work. Wind may twist the sheets around the line or send a poorly fastened towel into the garden. Freezing temperatures stiffen fabric. Humid air slows everything. A sudden shower requires you to abandon whatever else you're doing and run outside to rescue half-dry clothes, which then hang from basement lines and door frames while the house develops the atmosphere of a damp, theatrical wardrobe. On a clear day, sunlight and moving air provide freshness that bottled products will later attempt to imitate. The sheets may smell clean in a way that feels almost luxurious. Yet even this pleasant result requires lifting, pinning, monitoring, removing, carrying, and folding. Nothing about the clothesline is automatic except the wind, and the wind has not signed a contract promising cooperation. By late morning, the first dry items can be gathered, though sheets and heavier garments may need longer. Each piece is removed, shaken, and folded loosely in the basket. Some clothes can be stored with minimal attention. Others are only passing through on their way to the ironing board. Cotton dresses, shirts, handkerchiefs, pillowcases, table linens, and children's clothes may all require pressing depending on the standards of the household and the fabrics involved. Wrinkle-resistant materials are becoming more available, but they have not yet liberated every closet. If clothes become completely dry, they may need to be sprinkled with water and rolled or placed in a covered basket, so the moisture distributes evenly before ironing. This means the laundry process can extend across the day or into the evening. Washing does not lead directly to completion. It leads to drying, which leads to dampening, which leads to ironing. Progress has a strange circular quality in the modern home. The physical cost accumulates quietly. You bend toward the basket, lift wet fabric, reach above shoulder height, carry loads up and down stairs, stand on the concrete floor, and repeat the motions until your lower back tightens and your hands feel rough from water and soap. None of this looks heroic. There is no factory whistle time card, foreman, or paycheck. The equipment sits inside your home, so the work is described as part of living rather than a job. Yet the household depends on it. Clean clothing allows your husband to appear prepared at work, the children to appear cared for at school, the beds to feel fresh, and the kitchen to continue functioning. Laundry supports the family's public life from a room few visitors ever see. It is infrastructure disguised as a basket of socks. There may still be pleasure in the clean fabric, the moving line, the neat stacks, and the knowledge that a difficult job has been mastered. Many women developed efficient systems, preferred particular soaps, knew how to remove stubborn stains, and took genuine pride in keeping clothing in good condition. Skill and satisfaction were real. So was the fatigue. The machine reduced some of the hardest older forms of washing, but it also helped normalize more frequent laundering and higher standards. A clean shirt became easier to produce, so more clean shirts could be expected. The appliance did not simply remove work, it changed the definition of acceptable work. You carry the final empty basket back inside and pause beside the basement door. Behind you, the washer is quiet. Outside, the sheets lift gently in the breeze. Upstairs, every bed remains unmade. Dust waits on the furniture, and the vacuum cleaner stands in a closet with the patient confidence of another labor-saving machine preparing to explain how much labor it can save. A made bed was not simply a place prepared for sleep. It was evidence that the household had begun the day correctly. Upstairs, the bedrooms still carry the shape of the people who left them. Blankets pushed toward the foot pillows, flattened into strange personal landscapes. Pajamas resting on a chair with the careless confidence of clothing that expects someone else to deal with it. Morning light comes through the curtains and reveals everything the earlier darkness concealed, including dust on the dresser, a handprint on the mirror, and one child's collection of objects arranged along the windowsill without any obvious relationship to one another. You begin with the largest bed, pulling the sheets tight, smoothing the blanket, lifting the mattress corners, and tucking the fabric beneath them until the surface looks disciplined. Pillows are shaken, cases straightened, and the spread drawn evenly across the top. A bed that will be disturbed again tonight must nevertheless spend the day looking untouched. This is considered order. The room is not being prepared for use. It is being prepared to prove that use has been successfully erased. The children's beds require a different strategy. One contains a wooden toy beneath the blanket, discovered only after it presses into your hand. The other has somehow lost a pillowcase, despite the pillow remaining in the room. You gather socks, books, a hair ribbon, and a glass left beside the bed, placing each item where it belongs, or where you believe it belongs based on available evidence. Teaching children to make their own beds was possible, and many families expected them to help, but the final standard often remained attached to the mother. A child's attempt might be praised and then quietly corrected. The blanket could be crooked, the sheet loose, or the stuffed animal arranged with insufficient dignity. You smooth what they have left behind because a room seen by a visiting relative, neighbour, or school friend does not explain who made the bed. It simply enters the household record under your name. The children are learning responsibility. You are learning that responsibility occasionally involves redoing the lesson after they leave. Once the beds are made, the dust becomes visible. It lies along the dresser edges, beneath the radio, around frame photographs, and on the narrow wooden ledges where decorative objects have been placed specifically to create more surfaces requiring attention. Dusting seems gentle compared with scrubbing a stove or lifting wet laundry, but it has its own elaborate geography. Every object must be lifted, the space beneath it, wiped, and the object returned to roughly the same angle, because a photograph facing 2 inches farther left may disturb the room's invisible constitution. A cloth treated with polish gathers the grey film and releases the smell of wax wood and chemical brightness into the air. You wipe the headboard, the lamp base, the mirror frame, and the tops of doors that no guest is likely to inspect unless the guest has arrived with a ladder and a personal grievance. Still, dust has a remarkable ability to turn an ordinary surface into an accusation. Its greatest talent is not being dirty, it is being visible. Cleaning advice in women's magazines, household manuals, advertisements, and home economics materials often presented order as a system that could be mastered through schedules. Monday might belong to washing another day, to ironing another, to deeper cleaning with daily tasks arranged around meals and family routines. Systems could genuinely help. They prevented the entire house from becoming one overwhelming problem and allowed skilled homemakers to work quickly through familiar patterns. But a schedule also gave every room an appointment. If Tuesday was the day for bedrooms, the bedrooms did not care that the laundry had taken longer or that a child had stained a shirt requiring special treatment. The house waited without sympathy. You moved from room to room, carrying the dustcloth, a small basket, and the mental list that has followed you since breakfast. Every completed task reveals another. The lamp is clean, but the shade has a mark. The dresser shines, but the drawer pull is loose. The mirror is clear, but now the floor beneath it looks dull. Domestic order advances by discovering its own unfinished edges. Then comes the vacuum cleaner stored in the hall closet behind coats and ironing board, and several items that fall forward whenever the door opens. The machine is heavy upright or canister shaped with a cord that must be pulled across rooms and moved from outlet to outlet. Advertisements may present it as graceful modern assistants, often guided by a woman who appears to be gliding through the home with the ease of a ballroom dancer. Your machine behaves more like agricultural equipment with indoor ambitions. You drag it into the bedroom and wind the cord, move a chair, lift the edge of the bedspread and begin. The motor fills the room with a steady roar, eliminating any possibility of hearing the telephone, a child at the door, or your own doubts about the wisdom of placing so much furniture on top of carpeting. The machine pulls dust from the rug, but only after you have cleared its path, adjusted the attachment, avoided the fringe, and rescued the cord from beneath its own wheels. It saves labour while requiring upper body negotiations. The tracks left in the carpet matter almost as much as the dirt removed from it. Straight lines show that the room has been attended to. They create a temporary pattern of control, an orderly surface announcing that the machine has passed and the household is prepared. You guide the vacuum carefully beneath the bed, around the dresser, and into corners where the main head cannot reach. Attachments appear, Hoses are fitted and baseboards receive attention. Upholstered chairs collect lint. Curtains hold dust. Mattress edges conceal crumbs and threads that seem to have travelled upstairs from distant meals. The work becomes increasingly detailed, because the cleaner the room looks, the more noticeable each neglected patch becomes. There is a point at which cleanliness stops being the absence of dirt and becomes a visible style. Fresh vacuum lines, evenly placed pillows, polished wood, and curtains hanging without wrinkles all contribute to the same message. Someone is managing this house. The message is accurate, it simply omits the noise, sweat, and furniture shifting required to write it. The physical effort returns in small doses. You push the machine forward, pull it back, move the bed slightly, bend for the cord, and carry the cleaner into the next room. Your palms warm against the handle. A strand of hair escapes the carefully arranged style from earlier. Powder settles into the lines beside your nose. The house dress that looked crisp at breakfast now bears a faint mark from the vacuum hose and a damp patch where the laundry basket rested against your side. You are still dressed, still presentable, and still expected to answer the door as though you have spent the morning arranging flowers. This is one reason household work could be strangely difficult to describe. It combined physical labour with the expectation that the labourer should remain visually untouched by it. A factory worker could look as though work had occurred. A housewife was encouraged to make the work disappear from both the room and herself. Not every woman cleaned with the same intensity, and not every household treated vacuum tracks as a moral achievement. Some homes were relaxed, some crowded, some underfunded, some supported by older children or relatives, and some affluent enough to employ paid help. Many working women performed these tasks before or after a paid shift, while domestic workers, often women with fewer economic choices, carried the same physical burden inside other families' homes. The polished suburban ideal rested on sharply different realities. Yet the broader image of the well-kept house remained powerful because it converted private labour into public respectability. Clean rooms suggested discipline, prosperity, maternal care, and family stability, even when none of those things could truly be measured by a polished dresser. You switch off the vacuum and the silence rushes back into the hallway. The bedrooms now look calm, their surfaces smooth and their floors marked with neat parallel lines. The people who return this afternoon will enter drop books, loosen shoes, sit on beds, and begin undoing the arrangement almost immediately. That is not failure. It is the purpose of the house. Still before they return, the rooms must pass through this brief perfect state, when every object appears to know its place, and no human activity has yet disturbed the evidence of your work. You wind the cord, return the cleaner to the closet, and notice the time. The morning is slipping away. Downstairs, the front room still needs attention, and outside the window a neighbour's begun walking toward your house with a handbag on her arm. The beds are made, the dust is gone. The next test may already be approaching the front door. The front door was not merely an entrance, it was an inspection point between the private reality of the household and the version of that household permitted to appear in public. By late morning, the bedrooms are made, the carpets show fresh vacuum lines, and the kitchen has been restored to a condition suggesting that nobody has cooked, eaten, argued, spilled milk, or searched desperately for a missing shoe. You have just returned the vacuum cleaner to the hall closet when you see movement through the front window. A woman is crossing the neighbouring lawn with a handbag on her arm and a folded coat over one elbow. She may be coming to your house, she may be passing it. Either possibility immediately changes the room. Your eyes travel over the sofa cushions, the magazines on the coffee table, the child's pencil beneath the radiator, and the faint strip of dust the vacuum attachment did not quite reach along the baseboard. Nothing is truly wrong. The house is clean. But an unexpected visitor does not require disaster to create panic. She requires only enough time for you to imagine what another woman might notice. You move quickly without appearing to move quickly, which is one of the central physical skills of respectable domestic life. The pencil disappears into a drawer. A cushion receives one firm adjustment. The magazines are squared into a neat pile with the most respectable title placed on top, and the catalogue featuring girdles moved discreetly beneath it. You open the curtains slightly to improve the light, then reconsider, because stronger daylight reveals fingerprints on the glass. A knitted throw is folded over the chair arm. The ashtray is checked even if nobody has smoked in the room since last evening. If cigarettes are common in the household, the tray must be clean enough to suggest sociability without suggesting neglect. If the room contains fresh flowers, they are turned toward the most attractive side. If it does not, the ceramic bowl on the table must carry the decorative burden alone. The doorbell has not rung. The visitor may not even be a visitor. Yet the living room is undergoing emergency diplomatic preparation, because someone outside has chosen to walk slowly. Unannounced calls were not unusual in many communities, although habits differed by region, class, generation, neighborhood, and access to the telephone. A neighbor might stop by to borrow sugar, return a dish, collect money for a church event, discuss a school committee, deliver news, or simply have coffee. The visit could be warm, generous, and genuinely welcome. For women spending long hours at home, a familiar face at the door might break isolation and offer conversation that did not involve lunchboxes, cleaning products, or the emotional life of the refrigerator. But spontaneity had a price. The home needed to remain close enough to presentable that a knock did not expose the disorder of ordinary living. The public rooms mattered most: entryway, living room, kitchen, and bathroom. Bedrooms could be defended by closed doors. A pile of ironing in the dining room was more difficult to explain. The front of the house became a stage set maintained throughout the day, not because every visitor was cruel, but because every visitor possessed eyes, memory, and access to other women. The woman reaches your walk, and this time she does turn toward the porch. You glance down at your dress. It is still respectable, though the skirt carries a faint crease from kneeling beside the vacuum, and one strand of hair has escaped above your ear. There is no time to repair the entire structure. You smooth the fabric, tuck the strand into place, and prepare the expression required for someone who is delighted by interruption. The doorbell rings. A bright two-note sound moves through the house, and for half a second you understand why fortifications traditionally included warning systems. Then you open the door. Your neighbor stands holding a covered casserole dish that belongs to you, and a small envelope for the church women's committee. She smiles. You smile. Neither woman mentions that she's arrived without warning. That would imply the visit required permission, and much of neighborhood life depends on pretending that social access is effortless. You invite her inside because leaving her on the porch would create more questions than the house could survive. Coats are handled, handbags placed carefully, and the returned dish carried toward the kitchen. The visitor's eyes move naturally through the room. She's not conducting an official inspection. She simply notices things because people notice rooms, particularly rooms maintained by people performing similar work. The polished coffee table, straight curtains, clean rug, and orderly magazines all enter her understanding before either of you discusses them. She compliments the room, which may be sincere, and you deflect the compliment because openly accepting praise for housekeeping can sound vain. You explain that the place is still a mess despite the fact that the pencil has been imprisoned and the cushions are standing at attention. This ritual protects everyone. She may reassure you that her house is worse. You may both know this is unlikely. The conversation proceeds with the tact of two nations discussing military strength, while pretending to admire the weather. Coffee must now appear. Not because your neighbor has demanded it, but because hospitality has its own sequence. You offer. She hesitates. You insist gently. She accepts. The kitchen cleaned less than an hour earlier begins another cycle. Cups are selected preferably without chips. Sauces are added. Coffee is reheated or freshly made depending on how long it has been standing and how much domestic honour has been invested in the visit. A plate of cookies cake or crackers may emerge if something suitable exists. Offering nothing can feel ungenerous. Offering too much can feel showy. Serving the last good cookies may leave the children disappointed later, but this is a private consequence. Hospitality is partly the art of converting household supplies into social evidence. You set everything on a tray and carry it into the living room with the calm of someone who did not spend the previous 3 minutes calculating whether 4 remaining cookies look intentional. The conversation moves from children to groceries, from church plans to a neighbour who's been ill, from school matters to the price of meat. Some of it is practical, some of it is affectionate, some of it is the quiet circulation of reputation. News travels through visits like this, softened by concern and improved by repetition. A woman who rarely participates may be described as distant. One who participates too eagerly may be described as interfering. A home that is always closed can seem unfriendly. A home that is always open can become exhausted. The correct balance is never written down. You discover it by watching reactions, remembering who called on whom, and learning how long a visit should last before warmth becomes inconvenience. Social labour requires timing as delicate as breakfast eggs. You must be interested without prying, helpful without boasting, welcoming without revealing that the wet laundry is still waiting outside and the grocery trip has now been pushed later into the day. There is real comfort in these visits. Your neighbour may understand the work better than anyone else because she has left a similar house waiting behind her. She may notice your tired hands and say nothing. You may both laugh about children, husbands, weather, or a cake that collapsed at the wrong moment. For 20 minutes, the home is not only a workplace, it becomes a place of companionship. But even pleasant companionship sits inside the larger performance. You refill the cups, monitor the ashtray collect crumbs, and wonder whether she saw the faint smear on the window when the light shifted. When she finally rises, you walk her to the door, exchange another few words, and promise to attend the committee meeting. She steps back onto the porch, carrying nothing but her handbag. You close the door and stand in the sudden silence. The living room has survived, although 2 cups, 2 saucers, a used ashtray, scattered crumbs, and an envelope requiring attention now remain behind. The visit has added work while also relieving loneliness. Both things are true. You gather the tray and carry it toward the kitchen, where the clock reveals that the morning has advanced farther than expected. The grocery list is unfinished. The laundry must be checked. Lunch has not been considered. Outside, the neighbour disappears into her own house, perhaps carrying the same private awareness that someone might knock on her door next. The front room is still respectable. The social test has been passed. Now you must leave the house and submit yourself to another kind of inspection, under fluorescent lights beside shelves, arranged to persuade you that a good wife can solve almost any family problem by choosing the correct brand. The grocery list was not a reminder. It was a prediction about the future written in pencil beside a bread box, while the clock informed you that the morning was already slipping away. Before leaving the house, you must decide what 4 people will eat for several days, how much it will cost, which ingredients can serve more than one meal, and whether any unexpected guest plans to arrive hungry without notifying the budget. The list begins with what is missing: bread, milk, eggs, sugar, coffee, potato soup, and something for tonight's dinner. Then it expands. Your husband may be late one evening. The children need lunchbox food. A church meeting could require cookies. Sunday dinner should feel different from Tuesday dinner, even if several ingredients have quietly travelled between them wearing new sauces. You stand in the kitchen with a pencil, a newspaper advertisement, and a small household notebook containing figures that must remain cooperative until payday. The refrigerator hums beside you like a well-paid consultant offering no actual advice. You begin by inspecting what remains. The pantry holds canned tomatoes, condensed soup flour, crackers, a nearly empty jar of jam, and 3 cans purchased during an earlier sale, whose purpose has become less obvious with time. The refrigerator offers half an onion, several carrots, a piece of cheese, leftover roaster bowl, covered with waxed paper and milk that must last until the next bottle or carton arrives. Nothing is simply food. Each item is part of a sequence. The leftover roast might become sandwiches for lunch, then hash for dinner, then disappear into a soup whose name suggests deliberate planning rather than financial necessity. Carrots can accompany one meal and stretch another. Stale bread may become crumb stuffing or bread pudding if handled before it crosses the border from economical to archaeological. A skilled homemaker learned to see meals inside ingredients before those meals existed. Waste was not merely untidy. It threatened the budget and could be interpreted as evidence that the household was being managed without sufficient care. You examine the cheese trim one dry edge and decide it still has a future. The week must also contain variety because repetition carries its own social meaning. Serving the same dinner twice in 3 days may be practical, but the family is not always interested in the strategic elegance of practicality. They experience food as appetite. You experience it as mathematics. Monday's chicken can become Tuesday's casserole provided. The casserole does not look too much like Monday's chicken wearing a blanket. Ground beef can become meatloaf patty sauce, or something baked beneath mashed potatoes. Condensed soup can turn a collection of leftovers into a dish described by a magazine as modern. Gelatin can suspend fruit vegetables or several innocent ingredients that might have preferred to remain separate, although tonight you decide civilization has been tested enough. You write meal possibilities in the margin, crossing out anything that requires an expensive cut of meat or a specialty item likely to survive one recipe, and then occupy the cupboard for 6 months. The ideal list promises abundance. The actual list must know exactly how far a pound of anything can travel. Advertising complicates the calculation by arriving with cheerful solutions. Newspaper inserts and magazine pages suggest new cereals, cake mixes, frozen foods, cleaning products, canned vegetables, coffee shortening and desserts, all presented as small improvements to family life. A smiling woman can apparently transform dinner, marriage, motherhood, and personal confidence by purchasing the correct package. The photographs are persuasive because the food is bright, the kitchens are clean, and nobody appears to be checking the price. Convenience foods could genuinely save preparation time, especially in a crowded day. They could also cost more, disappoint a family accustomed to another recipe, or create the expectation that the time saved should be invested in producing an additional side dish. You compare one advertised bargain with the amount still in the household envelope. A coupon reduces the price, but only if you remember to carry it, purchase the proper size, and resist buying something unnecessary merely because the manufacturer has offered to return several cents of your own money. The budget is not written only in dollars, it is written in substitutions. If meat costs more this week, another meal becomes eggs, beans, macaroni soup or leftovers presented with confidence. If the children need school supplies, the dessert may become simpler. If your husband is bringing someone home, the better roast may be justified, followed by several quieter meals that nobody is encouraged to compare. Income region, race class, family tradition, and access to stores shape these decisions differently across the country. Some women shopped daily at neighborhood markets. Others made larger weekly trips by car. Rural families might rely more heavily on gardens, preserved food eggs, or long distances between stores. Working women often performed the same planning under even tighter time limits. There was no single national grocery routine, but the mental burden was widely recognizable. The person writing the list was responsible not only for buying food, but for anticipating every circumstance in which food might be needed. You check the household supplies next because the grocery store sells more than dinner. Laundry soap is low after the morning's loads. Dish detergent will not last the week. Waxed paper has been used for lunches. Toothpaste, bathroom tissue, floor cleaner, starch, and light bulbs compete with coffee and meat for the same limited money. A household product rarely announces its final use politely. It simply runs out at the moment when replacement is least convenient. You lift containers, judge their weight, and estimate whether they can survive until the next trip. There is a particular skill in knowing how much remains without measuring it, and a particular punishment for guessing wrong. Too little soap means unfinished laundry. Too little coffee means a breakfast table emergency beyond the authority of local government. Too much purchased at once means the food budget tightens somewhere else. You add soap to the list, then cross out a decorative item from the advertisement that briefly suggested the bathroom required improvement. By now, the paper has become a compact plan of household survival. Items are grouped loosely by department so you will not cross the store, repeatedly produce meat, dairy, canned goods, baking supplies, household products. Beside some items, you note a preferred brand. Beside others, you write only the cheapest acceptable option. Brand loyalty could be emotional, practical, or carefully encouraged by advertising. A familiar product promised predictable results, which mattered when a failed cake or poor detergent created more work than the savings justified. Yet the store would offer displays, sample signs, and brightly coloured packages designed to interrupt the plan. The list is your defence against those shelves. It is also flexible enough to respond to a genuine bargain. You fold it once and place it inside your handbag with the coupons, household money keys, and a handkerchief. Forgetting any one of these could convert an ordinary shopping trip into a personal lesson. Before leaving, you inspect yourself and the house again. The shopping dress or house dress must be clean enough for public errands. Hair receives a quick adjustment. Lipstick is checked. The laundry outside is studied for signs of rain. The stove is off the window, secure, and the front room prepared in case someone looks through the glass while you're gone. You pick up the empty shopping bags that can be reused depending on the store and the day, and pause beside the refrigerator. Inside it are the remains of earlier decisions. Soon they will be joined by the results of today's calculations, each purchase expected to become a meal, a lunch, a clean shirt, or a quiet proof that the household continues to function. The list rests inside your handbag, but most of it is still in your head. Which child dislikes onions? How much coffee remains when the milk will turn? Which dinner must be quick? Which meal should look special? And how much money must return home unspent? You lock the door and step into the late morning light. The car waits at the curb, or perhaps the store lies within walking distance. Either way, the planning phase is over. Soon you will enter a bright supermarket filled with more choices than earlier generations could easily imagine, each shelf offering freedom, convenience, and a carefully designed opportunity to spend more than you intended. The supermarket did not merely sell food. It offered several thousand small tests of judgment beneath fluorescent lights. You enter through a broad glass door with your handbag tucked beneath one arm and the folded grocery list held in the other hand like a document prepared for negotiation. Metal carts stand in a row near the entrance, their wheels already developing opinions about which direction they prefer. The store smells of ground coffee, waxed floors, fresh produce, butcher paper, and the faint cold air escaping from long refrigerated cases. Overhead signs divide the building into neat territories, produce canned goods, bakery, dairy, frozen foods, household supplies. The abundance feels modern, orderly, and almost theatrical. Earlier generations may have purchased meat from one shop, bread from another, and vegetables from a street market or neighborhood grocer. Here, everything waits beneath one roof, arranged so that a sensible woman can complete the household's provisioning efficiently. That is the official idea. The unofficial idea is that you will pass several hundred brightly packaged suggestions before reaching the milk. The cart begins with produce because the vegetables appear near the entrance, freshened by mist or carefully stacked beneath flattering light. Apples are inspected for bruises, lettuce for wilted edges, potatoes for soft spots, and bananas for the precise stage of ripeness that will survive both the journey home and the family's unpredictable interest. You calculate by touch and memory. How many carrots remain in the refrigerator? Will the children eat pears this week? Or will the pears sit in the fruit bowl until they become a household science project? A store employee may weigh an item, or the produce may be priced by the pound, requiring another small estimate before it reaches the checkout. The vegetables must look wholesome, cost little, and fit meals that already exist inside your head. A cabbage can stretch farther than asparagus. Potatoes can accompany almost anything. Celery can become soup, salad, stuffing, and eventually a collection of pale stalks wrapped in paper at the back of the refrigerator. You choose with care. Waste begins here long before anything is thrown away. The meat counter carries greater financial danger. Cuts of beef, pork, poultry, liver, sausage, and ground meat rest behind glass or in refrigerated displays wrapped in butcher paper or newer transparent packaging depending on the store. You compare prices, size, bone, fat, and the number of meals each purchase might become. A roast offers Sunday dignity, but requires a larger portion of the budget. Ground beef is flexible, familiar, and capable of appearing several times under different names. Chicken may provide dinner sandwiches, soup, and stock if managed with sufficient determination. The butcher can answer questions, suggest a cheaper cut, or prepare something to order, but asking for advice also reveals the calculation taking place. You want value without appearing unable to afford choice. Respectable thrift is admired. Visible financial strain is less comfortable. You select one package, replace it, choose another, and quietly perform arithmetic while a cheerful display card suggests that the family deserves something more expensive. The family may deserve it. The household envelope has not been informed. Farther down the aisles, the practical list begins competing with the packages. Canned vegetables, soup, fruit, coffee, shortening cereal, cake, mixes, crackers, gelatin, and cleaning products rise in bright rows, each label designed to make recognition feel like trust. Familiar brands promise dependable results, and dependable results matter when a failed meal costs both money and time. A cheaper, unfamiliar product may be perfectly good, but uncertainty has its own price. If the cereal goes uneaten, the savings disappear. If a cake mix behaves differently, the church committee will not gather around to praise your experimental budgeting. Advertising has already introduced many packages before you enter the store. Their colors, slogans, radio jingles, and magazine pictures return quietly as you reach toward the shelf. The choice feels personal, but the conversation began long before you arrived. You compare sizes, search for the item mentioned in the newspaper advertisement, and discover that the special price applies only when two are purchased. This is generous if you need two. If you need one, it is arithmetic wearing a party hat. Convenience foods occupy a particularly complicated place in the cart. Frozen dinners, prepared mixes, canned sauces, instant puddings, and packaged side dishes promise to shorten the hours spent measuring, peeling, stirring, and washing pans. The promise is real. A prepared product can rescue an evening disrupted by errands, illness, school events, or a husband arriving at an uncertain time. But convenience carries social questions. Is it economical? Will the family like it? Does serving it demonstrate modern efficiency or a suspicious unwillingness to cook? The answer may depend on who is eating, who is visiting, and how convincingly the product is presented. A cake mix can save time, but some advertisements famously encouraged women to add fresh ingredients or personal touches, so the finished cake still felt homemade. The package offered assistance, then politely asked not to receive too much credit. You place one convenience item in the cart for emergencies, arranging it beneath the vegetables as though lettuce provides moral supervision. Other shoppers become part of the performance. A neighbour may greet you near the canned fruit and glance naturally into the cart. She probably means nothing by it. You probably mean nothing when your own eyes notice the coffee meat or cleaning product she has chosen. Yet carts reveal households. An expensive cut suggests company or comfort. Several economy items may suggest careful budgeting. Large quantities can mean a big family, a gathering, or a sale too good to ignore. A frozen dessert may be modern and practical, or it may invite private speculation from someone who believes pie crust is a measure of character. You exchange a few pleasant words about children prices or the weather, then move apart with each woman carrying slightly more information than she had before. The supermarket is public enough for reputation and private enough for comparison. You're choosing groceries, but you're also displaying what sort of household you run. One visible package at a time. The household aisle threatens the budget through less appetizing necessities. Laundry soap cleanser, waxed paper starch, bathroom tissue, scouring powder toothpaste floor polish, and light bulbs have no role in dinner, yet the home cannot function without them. They consume money without producing a centerpiece. You lift one box of detergent and compare it with another, studying claims about brightness, softness speed, and modern scientific power. Each package appears to have defeated dirt in a laboratory. None mentions that you will still carry the box home, measure the powder, treat the stains, monitor the washer, hang the clothes, and iron the shirts. A floor product promises longer-lasting shine, which could mean less waxing or simply a more ambitious standard for the floor. You choose the familiar cleanser and place it beside the food where it sits with alarming confidence near the bread. The cart is becoming heavy. The amount remaining in the envelope is becoming light. At the checkout, every decision becomes final. Items move across the counter while the cashier records the prices, perhaps entering them by hand or using the store's mechanical equipment. You watch the total rise while unloading cans, meat-produced milk soap, and the one item not on the list that seemed sensible beneath the aisle display. Coupons are presented. A price is questioned politely. One product may be removed if the arithmetic has become too ambitious. The moment is public enough to feel uncomfortable and ordinary enough that everyone pretends not to notice. When the total is acceptable, relief arrives quietly. Groceries are placed into paper bags, heavier goods at the bottom, eggs and bread protected near the top. The bags look abundant now, but you already see the labour waiting inside them, carrying, unpacking, storing, washing, chopping, cooking, serving, and eventually cleaning everything used to prepare them. You leave the store with less money, more weight, and a strange mixture of achievement and unfinished business. The shopping trip has been completed correctly. You stayed close to the list, found several bargains, resisted at least one unnecessary display, and purchased enough raw possibility to keep the household fed and presentable for several days. The supermarket offered freedom of choice, but each choice arrived tied to budget, taste, appearance, habit, advertising, and the fear of forgetting something essential. Outside, sunlight reflects from the parked cars as you balance the bags and search for the keys inside your handbag. Lunch is now late. The laundry may need taking down. The house has been unattended long enough for nothing to happen, although you do not trust it. You place the groceries in the car or carry them toward home, where the next reward for successful planning is waiting 10 quiet minutes alone with a cold plate, provided you can convince yourself that sitting down is not another form of neglect. Lunch alone was supposed to be the quiet part of the day. No one was waiting for a plate, no child was disputing the shape of a sandwich, and no husband was watching the clock. Yet sitting down in an empty kitchen could feel oddly suspicious, as though rest required a witness willing to confirm that you had earned it. You return from the supermarket carrying paper bags that press into your fingers, set them on the counter, and immediately begin the second half of shopping, putting everything away. Milk goes into the refrigerator, meat into the coldest section, canned goods into the cupboard, potatoes into a dark bin, and soap somewhere safely distant from anything that will become soup. The lettuce must be wrapped, the butter stored, the bread protected from children who can consume half a loaf without remembering the event. By the time the bags are folded for reuse and the counter is cleared, the meal you planned to eat at noon has drifted toward one. The kitchen clock does not criticize you directly, it merely continues. Your lunch is assembled from what requires the least ceremony. Leftover roast between slices of bread, perhaps with a little mustard and a pickle. A bowl of soup warmed on the stove. Cottage cheese with fruit crackers with cheese, or yesterday's casserole eaten in a portion too small to create another round of dishes. A woman feeding herself alone was rarely the target of the grand advertisements. The photographs showed family tables, luncheon guests' attractive trays, and meals arranged with architectural ambition. They did not often show someone eating the edge of a sandwich over the sink while checking whether the laundry had dried. You place the food on a plate anyway and carry it to the table. For once there is no need to match anyone else's timing. The chair is available. The room is quiet. The privilege feels so unfamiliar that you remain standing for several seconds before remembering what chairs are for. Then the list begins speaking. The sheets are still outside. The refrigerator shelf needs wiping before the new groceries are fully settled. The church envelope rests on the sideboard. A telephone call must be made about the committee meeting. Dinner meat should be taken out early enough to prepare. The living room cups from the neighbour's visit are clean but not yet returned to the cupboard. None of these tasks is urgent enough to interrupt lunch, which makes them perfectly suited to doing so. You take one bite rise to move the meat, sit again, remember the coupon booklet on the counter, and then notice a damp ring beneath the milk carton. Rest becomes fragmented by noticing. The house is not demanding in a voice, it is demanding in objects. A towel out of place, a light dusting of flour, a drawer left open a sound from the washing machine downstairs. Each one makes the same quiet argument, since you are here you might as well. There was no universal rule declaring that a housewife should feel guilty for sitting down in the afternoon. Many women read, listened to the radio, visited friends, wrote letters, sewed for pleasure, watched daytime television, or simply rested when the work allowed. Some protected a small private hour with real determination. Others worked for wages outside the home and would have regarded a quiet lunch as an improbable luxury. But the promoted ideal of the efficient homemaker made idleness difficult to separate from failure. A good wife was active, organized, improving, preparing, preserving, and anticipating. If she stopped, the question was not always whether she needed rest. The question was whether something else could be done. This standard could follow a woman even when nobody else was present. External judgment had completed its finest trick. It had moved indoors and learned to use her own voice. You eat more slowly now, trying to defend the 10 minutes from interruption. The radio murmurs from the counter, carrying music household advice, a commercial, and news from a world in which labour is described by occupations with names. Your husband has a job title. The butcher has a job title. The cashier has a job title. The work you have completed since before sunrise appears under the softer heading of keeping house. That phrase contains breakfast grooming, child management, dishwashing, cleaning laundry, shopping, budgeting, hospitality, meal planning, and emotional supervision, yet somehow sounds like watching over a building to ensure it does not escape. You take another bite and look through the window at the clothesline moving in the breeze. The sheets are nearly dry. The light falls across them in broad white sections, and for a moment the scene is peaceful enough to resemble the life promised by the advertisements. The quiet also creates room for thoughts that busier hours keep safely occupied. You might wonder whether the day would feel different if more of it belonged visibly to you. You might enjoy the home love the family take pride in the work, and still feel the strange absence of an ending. Paid employment often comes with its own pressures and injustices, but it usually recognizes that a shift begins and finishes. Domestic labor blends into the environment. There is no moment when the house announces that it has received sufficient care. No manager tells you to go home because you're already there. Even leisure remains available for interruption. A ringing telephone, a child sent home from school, a delivery a neighbour, or a stain discovered on tomorrow's shirt can absorb the afternoon without asking permission. The house offers flexibility, but much of that flexibility belongs to everyone else. You finish the sandwich and drink the last of the coffee reheated from morning now improved only by comparison with its earlier temperature. The plate is nearly clean. No one has interrupted you. This should feel like success, but the stillness has revealed your fatigue more clearly than activity did. Your shoulders ache from the laundry basket. Your feet feel warm inside the house shoes. One curl has loosened near your cheek, and the lipstick prepared before breakfast has faded to a thin outline. In the silence you can hear the wall clock, the refrigerator motor, a distant lawnmower, and the faint rustle of sheets outside. These are not unpleasant sounds. They are the sounds of a functioning day. But a functioning day is not necessarily a restful one. The plate goes into the sink because leaving it on the table would turn lunch into a visible event requiring later correction. You rinse it, wipe the crumbs, and fold the napkin. The 10 quiet minutes disappear so completely that anyone entering the kitchen would never know they occurred. Perhaps that is why resting could feel morally uncertain. Work produced evidence, clean floors, pressed shirts, full cupboards, hot meals. Rest produced nothing visible except a woman who had stopped moving. You glance at the clock and reach for the household notebook. The telephone call must be made before school lets out, and the church committee will expect an answer about next week's gathering. Lunch is over. The afternoon social obligations are already waiting on the other end of the line. The telephone did not ring because the housework was finished. It rang because someone had found additional work that could be performed from home. Shortly after lunch, you sit beside the rotary telephone with the church committee envelope, a pencil, and the household notebook open across your knees. The receiver is heavier than a modern phone, the cord twists toward the floor, and each number requires the dial to travel slowly back into place before the next can be entered. There is no contact list, no silent message, and no convenient way to pretend you have not seen the call. In some communities, the line may even be shared with other households, making privacy less reliable, and long conversations a matter of public patience. Your first call is to confirm whether you can help prepare refreshments for next week's church gathering. The sensible answer is that your schedule is already crowded. The socially useful answer is yes. You agree to bring 24 cookies, assist with table decorations, and telephone 3 other women whose names have been written beside yours. The committee has discovered the extraordinary administrative capacity of a woman who is officially described as not having a job. Volunteer work could bring purpose, friendship, faith, influence, and genuine satisfaction. Church groups, school organizations, neighborhood associations, charity drives, hospital auxiliaries, scouting programs, and community clubs often depended on women who organized meals, raised money, sewed garments, visited the sick, prepared newsletters, collected donations, decorated halls, and remembered which family needed help. This work held communities together in practical ways. A new mother might receive casseroles. A grieving family might find a meal waiting. Children's programs, school events, holiday gatherings, and relief efforts happened because someone counted chairs, telephoned volunteers, and knew where the spare tablecloths were stored. Yet the labour was easy to minimise because it was unpaid and often performed through domestic skills that society already expected women to possess. Baking 60 cookies for a fundraiser was called helping. Coordinating 12 volunteers was called being involved. Managing money schedules, supplies, hospitality, and conflict was called having a little committee meeting. Apparently, administration ceased to be administration when served with coffee. You dial the first name on the list and wait while the clicks and pulses move through the line. A woman answers slightly breathless, and you begin with several minutes of polite conversation, because calling only to request labour can sound abrupt. You ask about her children, mention the weather, and inquire after a relative who's been unwell. Only then do you explain the gathering and ask whether she could bring a cake. She hesitates. Her husband may need the car. One child has a cold. She agrees to provide napkins instead. You write this down, thank her warmly, and adjust the plan. The second woman does not answer. The third is willing to help but dislikes working with the woman responsible for decorations. This information arrives in careful language involving misunderstandings, previous events, and one table arrangement that apparently left lasting diplomatic consequences. You listen, reassure, and promise nothing specific. The church committee may be dedicated to fellowship, but fellowship requires management. The telephone call is also a social performance. Your tone must be warm without sounding idle, interested without appearing curious in the wrong way, and efficient without suggesting that the person on the other end is wasting your time. Private news often travels along the same line as official arrangements. Someone's marriage is under strain. A neighbour has been seen crying. A child is struggling at school. A family may need groceries but does not want charity publicly offered. These details can become gossip, but they can also become the informal warning system through which women identify trouble before institutions do. The distinction depends on sympathy, discretion, and the intentions of everyone repeating the story. You may hear something important while arranging cookies, and then spend the afternoon deciding whether to act, remain silent, or tell one carefully selected person. A telephone network could injure reputations. It could also deliver help faster than any formal office. Community surveillance and community care sometimes use the same receiver. Between calls, the house continues presenting reminders. The laundry outside is ready to come in. A damp dish towel hangs near the sink. The groceries have been stored, but the refrigerator shelf remains unwiped. Dinner should begin in several hours, which means the meat requires preparation, and the dessert must be decided soon. You place one hand over the mouthpiece while checking a pot, then return to the conversation before the woman on the line notices you have moved. A modern office might call this multitasking. In the home, it's simply Tuesday. You write names, quantities, and telephone numbers in the notebook while mentally tracking the weather, the laundry, the children's return, and whether enough sugar remains for the cookies you have just promised. Social work does not replace domestic work. It settles over it like an additional transparent layer, almost invisible until the whole day becomes difficult to lift. Then the telephone rings again. This time it is someone from the school asking whether you can assist with a coming event, send baked goods, prepare materials, supervise children, or contact other parents. The request is phrased kindly and may involve something you genuinely value. You want the school supported. You want your children to feel that their family participates. You may enjoy seeing other adults and contributing to something beyond the house, but refusal carries its own quiet meaning. A mother who repeatedly says no can be judged as uninvolved, unfriendly, disorganized, or insufficiently devoted even when money, transportation, paid employment, illness, or exhaustion makes participation difficult. Women with fewer resources often face the same expectations with less ability to meet them. Those with domestic help, nearby relatives, reliable cars, and comfortable budgets could volunteer more visibly. Community virtue was easier to display when someone else was washing the dishes. You agree to one smaller school task and decline another with careful regret. The refusal requires explanation because a simple no sounds too complete. You mention the church commitment, the household schedule, and the possibility that your husband may need the car. The person understands, but you still feel the need to promise help another time. This is how obligations reproduce. Each accepted task creates work. Each refused task creates a future debt. The social calendar may contain no wages and no formal supervisor, yet it can occupy mornings, afternoons, and evenings with deadlines that are entirely real. Invitations must be answered, thank you notes written, sick neighbours visited, birthdays remembered, dishes returned, sympathy expressed, new families welcomed. A woman who performed this labour well could build deep friendships and become essential to the community. She could also become essential to so many people that very little of her time remained unquestionably her own. By the final call, the pencil has left a faint mark on your finger, and the notebook page has become a map of promises. 2 dozen cookies, 1 packet of napkins, 3 women contacted, a school envelope to prepare, a neighbour to check on tomorrow. None of these tasks will appear when someone asks what you did all day. They will appear later as tables arrange children, supervise families supported, and gatherings that seem to organize themselves. The telephone returns to its cradle with a solid click. For a moment the room is quiet again, and you look at the written list with the mixed satisfaction of someone who has been useful, and the private alarm of someone who has just expanded the week. Outside, the sheets lift against the clothesline and the afternoon light has begun to change. You carry the laundry basket into the yard, release each clothespin, and fold the dry fabric over your arm. Soon the school bus will turn onto the street. The peaceful rooms will fill with dropped books, unfinished stories, hunger noise, and several problems that have been waiting all day to be delivered directly to you. The telephone calls are complete. The social work has been assigned. 3 o'clock is approaching and the house is about to change shape. 3 o'clock did not bring the children home so much as release the outside world directly into the hallway. A few minutes earlier, the house had been almost unnaturally calm. The beds were smooth, the carpet showed orderly lines, the telephone rested in its cradle, and the last dry sheet had been folded over your arm. Then the school bus appears at the corner brakes with a mechanical sigh and opens its door. Children spill onto the pavement carrying metal lunchboxes, books, coats, artwork, notices and several emotions that have been stored all day for immediate delivery to their mother. You watch from the front window long enough to confirm that both of yours are present. By the time they reach the porch, one is running, the other is walking slowly, and neither has retained the polished appearance sent to school that morning. A collar has folded inward. One knee is dusty. Hair has escaped its careful arrangement. The front door opens, and the household shifts from controlled stillness to active weather. Shoes land near the mat rather than on it. A coat falls across the banister. One lunchbox is placed on the hall table, with sufficient force to suggest a difficult relationship with education. Books slide onto a chair. The clean floor receives a trail of mud, grass, pencil shavings, and whatever substance has attached itself to a child's sleeve during recess. Before you can ask anyone to hang up a coat, both children begin speaking. One has been treated unfairly by a teacher. The other needs cardboard for a project due tomorrow, despite apparently learning of the project several days earlier. A classmate said something unkind. A spelling paper must be signed. Someone traded the good cookie from lunch for an object of no nutritional or commercial value. You try to separate the information by urgency while rescuing the lunchboxes, moving the books, and preventing a damp jacket from touching the freshly vacuumed chair. The house has not become disordered because the children are badly behaved. It has become disordered because people are using it. Unfortunately, the domestic ideal preferred evidence of family life without too much evidence that a family had actually passed through the room. Hunger arrives immediately. School has apparently consumed every calorie provided at breakfast and lunch, leaving both children in a condition they describe as starvation. You direct them toward the kitchen, where a snack must satisfy appetite without damaging dinner. Milk and cookies may be simple, but too many cookies could provoke later refusal of vegetables. Bread with peanut butter, crackers with cheese fruit, leftover cake, or something warm on a cold day might appear instead. The choice depends on the pantry, the budget, and how much additional washing you're prepared to create. You pour milk, slice an apple, and place crackers on a plate while the children continue narrating the day in overlapping sections. One needs sympathy, the other needs correction. Both need to be reminded not to speak with full mouths. A glass tips but does not fall. Crumbs scatter across the table cleaned that morning. You look at them and understand that the kitchen floor has begun its second career. The lunchboxes must be opened before their contents develop independent life. Waxed paper, apple cores, crumbs, a forgotten sandwich half, and a thermos carrying the faint smell of soup all return from school. The metal interiors need wiping and drying before tomorrow. A child who has eaten nothing may insist there was no time the sandwich was wrong, or the table smelled strange. You must decide whether this is a temporary complaint or evidence that tomorrow's lunch requires revision. The mental planning begins again. Perhaps cheese instead of egg. Perhaps the apple should be sliced. Perhaps the thermos seal is leaking. Lunch preparation is not complete when food leaves the house. It continues when the evidence returns. You rinse one container while asking why the library book was not returned, and the answer travels through several unrelated events involving another child, a substitute teacher, and a pencil that was apparently essential to the whole affair. Childhood explanations have the structure of congressional hearings, except nobody has taken notes. Homework waits beneath the conversation. In some households, children were expected to work at the dining table, a desk, or the kitchen counter, while their mother supervised between tasks. The exact expectations varied by school-age, family, and community, but school success increasingly became another area in which maternal attention could be measured. You clear a space, sharpen a pencil, find an eraser, and examine the spelling list. One child begins promptly. The other studies the ceiling with remarkable concentration. You turn toward dinner preparations, then back toward the arithmetic page, answering a question without solving the problem outright. The challenge is to help enough that the child succeeds, but not so much that the work becomes yours. This boundary is difficult to maintain when dinner is approaching. The assignment is unfinished, and everyone's patience has entered the late afternoon. The school papers carry their own quiet judgments. A marked test, a note about behavior, A request for supplies or a teacher's comment may produce pride, concern, embarrassment, or immediate action. A child's performance was not always treated as the child's alone. Mothers could be praised for neat work, good manners, strong reading, and punctual assignments, or privately blamed when those things were missing. The pressure was especially sharp for families already facing judgment because of class, race, immigration, background, language, disability, religion, or neighborhood reputation. A clean collar and completed worksheet could not remove prejudice, but parents still understood that small mistakes might be interpreted more harshly when a family stood outside the favored ideal. You sign one paper, ask a careful question about another, and remind yourself not to turn a difficult school day into a trial. The child may need discipline. The child may also need home to remain the one place where imperfection does not become a permanent identity. The afternoon requires emotional translation as much as supervision. A child says a teacher is mean when the deeper problem may be embarrassment. Another claims not to care about a classmate while watching your face for evidence that the hurt has been noticed. You listen while peeling potatoes, measuring ingredients, or folding the final pieces of laundry at the end of the table. There is no separate appointment for these conversations. They occur beside the cutting board, beneath the sound of running water and in the brief moments before someone remembers another assignment. You're expected to understand what happened, judge, whether intervention is necessary, preserve the child's trust, and avoid turning ordinary conflict into a neighborhood event. Emotional care is rarely visible afterward. There is no polished surface proving that a frightened child felt calmer or that a small humiliation did not grow larger. The evidence may be nothing more than a child returning to the homework page. Once again, successful work produces the appearance that no work was needed. Not every afternoon was tense. Children could bring laughter, affection stories, handmade drawings, and the particular energy that made the house feel inhabited rather than maintained. A mother might enjoy the noise after hours alone, take pleasure in hearing about school, or feel proud as a child read aloud at the table. The work and the love were not opposites. Often they were tangled so closely that one created the other. You wipe a smear of pencil from a hand, admire a drawing with genuine attention, and place it against the refrigerator beneath a small magnet. The appliance now displays proof that the day contained something beyond cleaning and groceries. For a moment the child smiles, the room softens, and the afternoon feels exactly as warm as memory later prefers it. Then the clock moves toward 4. Homework is not finished. The snack dishes remain in the sink. Books and coats still wait in the hallway, though they have been mentioned several times. Dinner must begin, and one child has just remembered that tomorrow requires a clean white shirt. The house has changed shape again. Morning order has given way to the crowded, affectionate disorder of family life. But before evening arrives, you will be expected to make both the house and the children presentable once more. A clean collar, completed assignment, and properly behaved child will travel into public tomorrow, carrying your invisible signature. For now, the potatoes wait on the counter, the spelling words wait on the table, and the next lesson in maternal responsibility has already begun. A child's mistake rarely arrived alone. It carried a collar, a report card, a teacher's expression, and the quiet possibility that someone would interpret the whole thing as evidence about you. By late afternoon, the kitchen table has become a temporary classroom. One child bends over a spelling list while the other attempts arithmetic with the grave expression of someone negotiating international debt. Eraser crumbs collect near the milk glass. A ruler lies diagonally across a workbook. The potatoes wait half-peeled beside the sink because dinner and education are now sharing the same room. You move between them, checking a subtraction problem, answering a question about vocabulary, and reminding both children that pencils work better when held near the paper rather than waved toward a sibling. The work appears to belong to the students, but the schedule supplies encouragement correction, and eventual completion have entered your jurisdiction. If the page returns to school neat, accurate, and on time, the child receives credit. If it returns crumpled, unfinished, or decorated with a jelly stain, the household may receive an unofficial evaluation. School success had always depended partly on family circumstances, but post-war expectations increasingly emphasized the attentive mother who monitored homework, attended meetings, maintained routines, and ensured that the child arrived prepared. The ideal was comforting because it suggested that careful parenting could produce orderly results. It was also punishing because children are not household appliances and do not become predictable when polished. One child may read easily and dislike numbers. Another may be bright, restless, shy, anxious, bored, or unable to understand an instruction that seemed obvious to everyone else. Teachers varied, schools varied, resources varied, yet difficulty could still be interpreted as insufficient discipline at home. You point to the same arithmetic problem for the third time, trying to explain the method without allowing frustration into your voice. The child stares at the page, then at you, then toward the window where several neighborhood children are already outside. The answer remains incorrect. The clock moves closer to dinner. Apparently maternal devotion can be measured in fractions. The clean white shirt remembered at the last possible hour now waits beside the ironing board. It was washed earlier, but drying has left it wrinkled, and tomorrow's school event requires something better than merely clean. You sprinkle the fabric lightly, smooth it across the board, and heat the iron while continuing to call spelling words from the kitchen doorway. Cotton demands attention. The collar must lie flat, the cuffs pressed, the sleeves arranged so that one crease appears rather than several competing versions. A scorch mark would destroy the shirt. Too little pressure would leave it looking careless. You guide the iron over the damp cloth, releasing a warm smell of starch and clean fabric into the room. Behind you, a child spells necessary incorrectly for the second time. The irony is almost generous. Every visible part of the next school day is being prepared at once: the lesson, the clothing, the lunch plan, the signed paper, and the child's confidence. Only the mother is becoming less presentable with each improvement. Clothing carried social meaning because children move through public spaces under the gaze of teachers, neighbors, relatives, and other parents. A patched garment could show care and thrift, but it could also expose financial strain. A dirty cuff might simply reflect a child's afternoon, yet it could be read as neglect. These judgments were not applied equally. Families with money, familiar accents, established reputations, and the right social connections were more likely to have mistakes treated as temporary. Poor families, black families, immigrant families, religious minorities, and others already subject to suspicion often knew that the same wrinkled shirt or late assignment could be interpreted more harshly. Mothers understood that appearance could not eliminate prejudice, but they also understood the possible cost of offering critics additional evidence. A clean collar became a small shield. A polite child became a family statement. The labor invested in both was partly practical and partly defensive. Behavior mattered just as much as appearance. A note from school rests beside the spelling book, folded once and addressed in the teacher's careful handwriting. Your child has been talking during class. The offense is not severe, but it requires a response. You ask what happened. The first answer suggests complete innocence. The second introduces another child. The third reveals that a joke was told during silent reading. You listen while deciding how stern to be, whether the teacher's account is complete, and what consequence will correct the behavior without turning the child into a criminal defendant. Discipline was expected to be effective, but maternal anger was expected to remain controlled. Too little correction might suggest weakness. Too much could create fear, shame, or resentment. You explain the rule, require an apology, and perhaps remove a privilege. Then you sign the note aware that your signature is also a small declaration to the school. The problem has been received. The household is functioning and responsible adults remain in command. The children watch your face closely. They are learning more than spelling and manners. They are learning which mistakes threaten belonging, which disappointments can be discussed, and whether home remains safe after failure. You may want them to understand responsibility, but you do not want them to believe love depends on perfect performance. That distinction is easy to state and difficult to maintain while dinner burns the iron heats and a teacher's note waits for tomorrow. You soften your tone and ask the child to try the spelling word once more. This time it is correct. The small success changes the room immediately. Shoulders relax. The pencil moves again. You praise the effort without sounding too relieved because the goal is to make learning seem natural rather than the outcome of a domestic emergency involving potatoes and starch. There is genuine pride in watching a child improve. A correct answer, a neatly written page, a book read aloud with growing confidence, or a shirt finely buttoned without help can make the day feel worthwhile. Many mothers enjoyed teaching, encouraging, and seeing their children develop. But pride could live beside fear. A child's future seemed to depend on countless small habits, and the mother was often told that she was responsible for building nearly all of them. Good posture, good manners, clean clothes, emotional stability, school success, healthy meals, proper friends, cheerful behavior, and respect for authority collected beneath the broad heading of motherhood. The expectations were so comprehensive that ordinary childhood began to look like a product under continuous quality control. By the time the homework pages are finished, the table must be cleared quickly for dinner. Books are stacked, pencils returned to a box, the signed note placed inside the correct folder, and the white shirt hung where it cannot be crushed before morning. The children are released to play for a short while, carrying their noise into another room. You return to the potatoes and discover that the surface of the water has clouded. The iron stands cooling nearby. School has been managed for today, but nothing is truly complete. Tomorrow will bring another assignment, another collar, another paper, another moment when the child's behavior seems to reflect backward onto the person who packed the lunch. You glance at the clock. 5 o'clock is approaching. Soon your husband will return to a house that has already lived several full days since he left. The children must be settled, the dinner must advance, the table must be arranged, and you must somehow remove the evidence that the afternoon climbed directly across your dress, hair, and face. The mother has done her work. Now the wife expected at the front door must be reconstructed before the key turns in the lock. 5 o'clock was not merely an hour. It was a deadline by which the entire day had to stop looking like work. The children's books still occupy one end of the kitchen table. Potato peels rest near the sink. The ironing board has not yet been folded, and your house dress carries a faint mark from the vacuum cleaner, along with a flowery handprint placed there by someone who no longer remembers touching you. In less than an hour, your husband will turn onto the street step through the front door and enter the evening portion of his day. You're still inside the afternoon portion of yours, which must now be concealed. The promoted ideal of the cheerful post-war wife often suggested that a husband returning from work should encounter calm, a welcoming home-orderly children dinner, progressing smoothly, and a wife who looked pleased rather than personally defeated by the infrastructure required to create all four. No universal law required this transformation, and many marriages divided evening life differently. Yet the image was familiar enough to create pressure. He had faced the world outside, Your contribution was to make home feel as though the world had not followed him in. You begin with the children because they are the least decorative part of the current arrangement. One is sent to wash hands and face. The other must collect books, pencils, and the mysterious paper scraps that have spread across the table. Shoes are moved away from the doorway. Coats finally reach their hooks. A toy left in the hall is carried upstairs, accompanied by a reminder that the living room is not a storage depot archaeological site or testing ground for wooden trucks. The children are not expected to become silent statues, but they should appear manageable when their father arrives. Their hair is smoothed, a shirt is retucked. A dispute that has been gaining strength all afternoon must be settled before it becomes the first sound heard at the door. You lower your voice and ask them to do the same. The request is partly considerate. It is also stage management. Family life may be noisy, but the opening scene of the evening should suggest that noise has signed an agreement to remain reasonable. Then you survey the house from the perspective of someone who has not witnessed the day. The hallway receives a quick sweep. The sofa cushions are straightened again. The afternoon newspaper, if delivered, is placed where your husband expects to find it. Ashtrays are emptied. The kitchen table is cleared and wiped. The ironing board disappears into a closet, taking with it the evidence of the school shirt and the hour spent supervising homework. A damp dishcloth is replaced with a cleaner one. The snack dishes are washed or hidden within the larger structure of dinner preparation. This is not deep cleaning. It is selective historical revision. The house must not look unused because that would be unnatural. It must look gently lived in by people who somehow produce no clutter, require no laundry, complete homework without paper, and prepare meals without disturbing a surface. You move through the rooms, restoring lines and removing objects, not because your husband is necessarily inspecting them, but because the ideal wife is expected to anticipate what might affect his comfort before he becomes aware of it. Your own reconstruction happens in the bathroom mirror. The face prepared before breakfast has been worn through cleaning laundry, shopping, telephone calls, schoolwork, and steam from the kitchen. Powder has faded. Lipstick remains mostly at the edges. The carefully arranged hair has loosened around the temples, and your expression has acquired the flat seriousness of someone who has been responsible for too many clocks. You wash your hands, cool your face with a damp cloth, replace the powder and apply fresh lipstick. A comb and several hairpins restore the shape well enough to survive the evening. The house dress may be changed for a cleaner afternoon dress if time custom and the household routine encourage it. Some women enjoyed changing clothes using the ritual as a genuine division between housework and evening. For others, it was another task performed for an audience. Either way, the transformation must be quick. Dinner is still cooking, and cosmetics have not yet learned to peel potatoes. The advice surrounding a husband's homecoming varied, and later reproductions have often exaggerated or fabricated specific rules. Still reel magazines, advertisements, advice columns, television programs, and social expectations frequently presented the wife as the guardian of domestic atmosphere. She was encouraged to understand that paid work could be tiring, that the home should offer relief, and that complaints might be better delayed until the husband had eaten or settled. This did not mean every wife waited silently at the door, nor that every husband demanded ceremonial attention. Many couples greeted one another, warmly shared news, divided tasks, argued immediately, or behaved with the ordinary inconsistency of real people. But the public ideal placed emotional timing largely in the woman's hands. She should be attentive without appearing anxious, attractive without appearing vain, interested without unloading the entire day, and grateful for his return without mentioning that she had been counting the minutes, because an additional adult had finally entered the building. The difficulty is that you do have things to say. The school sent a note, The church committee assigned cookies. A household item is running low. One child needs supplies. A neighbour shared concerning news. The budget has tightened after the grocery trip. The bathroom tap may be leaking. Your own back hurts and you have not experienced an uninterrupted conversation with another adult since the neighbour's visit. Each issue is real, yet presenting all of them at the door risks making home feel like another office. So you arrange the information by urgency. The school note can wait until dinner. The leaking tap should be mentioned before it becomes a private indoor fountain. The grocery budget may require discussion later when no child is listening. Your fatigue receives no scheduled appointment. Emotional management includes deciding not only what the family needs to know, but when each person is most capable of hearing it. The household depends on truth. It also depends on someone distributing truth in manageable portions. At the stove, dinner advances with less interest in psychology. Potatoes must finish cooking. Meat must be turned, basted, browned, or stretched through a sauce. Vegetables need heating without collapsing into complete surrender. A salad, bread, or dessert may be prepared depending on time and expectation. You work in a cleaner dress now, which adds the challenge of avoiding grease steam flour and children carrying open cups. The aroma begins to move into the hallway, creating exactly the welcome advertisements promised. Nobody entering the house will smell the burned edge trimmed from one potato or the anxiety beneath the gravy. They will smell dinner. This is another domestic achievement whose success depends on removing its biography. A car door closes outside. The children hear it first and rush toward the window. You check the clock lower, the stove flame, wipe your hands and glance once at your reflection in the darkening kitchen glass. The house is not perfect, but it is composed. The children have been reminded not to shout 3 separate requests before their father removes his coat. Dinner is close enough to ready that confidence remains possible. You move toward the hallway as the key enters the lock. The door opens, bringing in cool air, wool, city dust, and the tired figure of the man who left shortly after breakfast. You smile, and the smile may be partly performance, but it is not necessarily false. You may be genuinely glad to see him. Love and exhaustion are capable of occupying the same doorway. He steps inside, greets the children, removes his coat, and asks how the day went. This is the dangerous question. The complete answer would require several hours' visual aids and a guided tour of every surface that has already been cleaned. Instead, you say that it was busy, mention one amusing event and ask about his day. The 5 o'clock transformation has succeeded. He sees the tidy hallway, the waiting newspaper, the smell of dinner, the calmer children, and the woman whose lipstick has recently been restored. He does not see the pin curls, grocery calculations, wet sheets, telephone diplomacy, arithmetic struggle, or the 10-minute lunch that vanished without evidence. The work has not disappeared. It has been converted into comfort. Then a child interrupts with the school note the potatoes begin boiling over, and your husband announces that he may have invited a colleague to dinner later in the week. The evening has officially begun. You turn back toward the kitchen where 4 dishes, 1 clock, and several individual preferences are preparing to test whether domestic calm can survive direct contact with the family meal. Dinner on schedule required 4 dishes, 1 clock, and the ability to look as though none of them had ever caused you concern. By 5:30, the kitchen has become a control room. The meat occupies the oven, the potatoes wait beneath a lid, vegetables simmer in a smaller pan, and gravy develops in a skillet where heat, flour, fat, and confidence must reach agreement at precisely the same moment. Bread is wrapped in a clean cloth or warming near the stove. A salad may be waiting in the refrigerator, prepared early enough to save time, but not so early that the lettuce loses the will to continue. The table must be ready before the food is finished. yet the food cannot be abandoned while you set it. You move between burner cupboard and dining room, carrying spoons, plates, napkins, glasses, salt, pepper, and whatever small object the table appears to need only after you've returned to the kitchen. The family hears pans, cupboard doors, and running water. What they should not hear is panic. Panic is not part of the recipe. Timing is the real ingredient. Meat can rest for a few minutes, but vegetables become soft with astonishing speed. Potatoes cool. Gravy thickens into masonry if ignored. Bread burns quietly because bread has learned that nobody watches it until the room smells accusatory. You lift one lid, stir another pan, open the oven, and immediately lose heat from the kitchen while gaining it across your face. A child enters asking whether dinner is ready. You say almost. The child interprets this as an invitation to inspect every pot. Your husband calls from the living room to ask whether you need help, but the question arrives after the sequence has become too complicated to explain. You could ask him to set the table, except the table is already set. You could ask him to mash the potatoes, but the buttermilk masher serving bowl and desired consistency currently exist only inside your head. By the time the instructions are delivered, the vegetables may have entered retirement. You answer that everything is fine. This is not information. It is a strategy. The promoted family dinner carried more weight than an ordinary evening meal could reasonably support. It was nourishment, proof of care, evidence of budgeting a daily family gathering, and a visible demonstration that the household had remained stable while the husband was away. Advice columns and food advertisements frequently place the wife at the center of this ritual, encouraging variety, nutrition, attractive presentation, and cheerful service. The standards were not identical in every home. Some families ate early, others late. Some relied on one-pot meals, leftovers, simple suppers, takeout from local shops, or meals prepared by several family members. Many wives worked outside the home and faced the remarkable expectation that dinner would still emerge on time after their paid shift. Yet the polished ideal remained powerful. The family assembled, the father seated the children clean, and the mother bringing in a complete meal with the calm expression of someone who had not spent the previous hour preventing several foods from becoming inedible at different rates. You begin transferring everything into serving dishes because cooking pans belong to labor and serving bowls belong to dinner. The distinction creates additional washing, but it also creates presentation. Potatoes are spooned into a bowl and smoothed across the top. Vegetables receive butter. Meat is placed on a platter and arranged so that the more attractive side faces the family. Gravy enters a boat or small bowl without dripping down the edge. A garnish may appear if the household possesses parsley energy and an unreasonable commitment to decorative leaves. These details can be enjoyable. A beautifully arranged meal offers real pride, especially after a day spent turning disorder into order. But the final appearance also hides compromise. The browned edge has been trimmed away. The thin gravy has been corrected. The smaller portion of meat is disguised by slicing. A successful dinner does not tell the story of its preparation. It simply arrives looking inevitable. Then one child announces a dislike for the vegetables before tasting them. The other asks whether there is dessert. Your husband has begun describing his day, and you listen while carrying the final dish to the table. The family sits. You remain standing long enough to retrieve the butter, then the serving spoon, then the water pitcher that was beside the sink all along. Grace may be said depending on the household. Plates are passed. Portions must satisfy appetite without consuming tomorrow's lunch. The best piece may go to the husband, the smaller pieces to the children, and whatever remains to you, although customs and family habits vary. You watch how much everyone takes because the meal plan extends beyond tonight. Leftovers are not accidental. They are scheduled citizens of tomorrow. A roast served generously now may fail to become sandwiches later. Domestic abundance sometimes depends on making scarcity look well organized. Conversation must also be served in manageable portions. Your husband speaks about a colleague, a delayed train, a difficult customer, or the possibility of inviting someone to dinner. The children offer stories from school, interrupt one another, and require reminders about elbows chewing and the purpose of napkins. You consider mentioning the grocery total, the school note, the church cookies, and the leaking tap. Each subject has a temperature. Some can be served beside potatoes. Others will ruin the gravy. You choose the school note first because it has already escaped secrecy. Your husband responds perhaps more sternly or more casually than you expected, and you adjust the discussion to prevent the child from becoming defensive. Then the guest invitation is raised. You ask which evening. He does not remember. The menu for an unknown future date begins assembling itself in your mind while you smile and pass the bread. The dinner table can be warm, funny, and deeply comforting. Families share news, establish rituals, tease one another, and create memories around meals that were never photographed. A child may tell a story so ridiculous that everyone laughs. Your husband may compliment the meat or notice the fresh shirt prepared for tomorrow. Someone may reach for another helping, and the simple fact that the food is enjoyed can make the labor feel worthwhile. These moments are real. So is the responsibility for producing them. The emotional tone of the meal often rests partly with the person who has already monitored everyone's mood since breakfast. If your husband is tired, the children must be quieter. If one child is upset, the subject may need changing. If the budget is strained, nobody should feel that the meal is inadequate. You've cooked dinner, but you're also maintaining the small climate around it, adjusting pressure before a storm forms over the peas. Only after everyone has begun eating do you notice that you are hungry. You sit, take a bite, and immediately rise because the salt has remained near the stove. When you return, your food is still warm, which feels like a private triumph. The meat is acceptable. The potatoes are smooth. The vegetables have not collapsed completely. 4 dishes have reached the table at nearly the same time. No guest would identify the moment when the gravy almost failed. No family member knows that dessert was selected because it could be prepared cheaply from ingredients already in the cupboard. The performance has succeeded precisely because the mechanics are invisible. Then plates begin to empty. Your husband leans back. The children ask to be excused. The official family meal is ending and everyone else is approaching the quieter portion of the evening. You look toward the kitchen where the preparation pans, serving dishes, utensils, glasses, plates, crumbs, and grease wait beneath the light. Dinner has been served on schedule. The clock has been defeated for perhaps 5 minutes. Now the meal must be erased, and the family's evening can begin only because yours is about to continue at the sink. The family table did more than hold plates. It held moods, hierarchies, expectations, and the daily question of whether everyone could remain comfortable long enough to finish the meal. By the time the serving dishes begin to empty, the practical work of cooking has given way to something less visible. You watch your husband's face as he describes the office, listen for the point at which one child's story becomes an interruption, and notice that the other has stopped eating without announcing why. The room contains forks, glasses, napkins, and several emotional temperatures that must not be allowed to boil at once. You ask a gentle question, change the subject past the potatoes, and remind a child to sit properly before the correction sounds like criticism. The dinner table may look like a shared family space, but someone is still coordinating it. The meal is warm, the conversation is civil, the children are mostly contained. These outcomes appear natural only because you have been adjusting them minute by minute. Comfort rarely announces what it requires. Your husband may want to talk without being challenged too quickly. One child wants attention for a story that has already lasted 4 times longer than the event itself. The other is embarrassed about the school note and hopes nobody returns to it. You want to mention the grocery budget, but the moment is wrong. You want to ask when the invited colleague might arrive, but your husband is halfway through an account involving someone at work who has misunderstood a customer. So the question waits. Emotional timing becomes another domestic skill as practical as knowing when to turn the meat. A subject introduced too early can sour the room. A complaint delayed too long can become resentment. You sort information in silence, deciding what belongs at dinner, what belongs after the children leave, and what may never find a proper time at all. Nobody has appointed you chairwoman of the family atmosphere. The position has simply attached itself to the person already passing the bread. Table manners add another layer of supervision. Elbows must be moved, napkins used, mouths closed, glasses held carefully, and food tasted before being rejected with unnecessary drama. These rules can teach consideration and make shared meals more pleasant. They can also turn dinner into a small examination, in which the mother is both instructor and person, most likely to be blamed for poor results. A child who reaches across the table may be corrected lightly at home, but the same habit displayed before grandparents, neighbours, teachers, or dinner guests can become evidence that training has failed. You repeat the familiar reminders without making the meal feel like a courtroom. Sit up. Chew first. Ask politely. Do not poke your brother with the fork. The last instruction is not found in etiquette manuals, but domestic life frequently requires supplemental regulation. The meal also reveals who is permitted to have preferences. Your husband may dislike overcooked vegetables, one child may refuse onions, and the other may eat only the crisp edge of a casserole. You remember these details because forgetting them creates waste complaint or both. Your own preferences are more flexible, partly because flexibility is useful when dividing portions. The smaller piece of meat the broken, serving the over-browned potato, and the last spoonful that does not quite match the others often travel toward your plate. No law requires this. Many families distribute food differently, and many husbands or children notice and insist on fairness. But in households where the woman plans, cooks, and serves, she's also best positioned to conceal the less attractive pieces inside her own meal. The family sees complete plates. You see inventory management with gravy. This quiet service can be loving rather than resentful. You may know that one child needs encouragement after a difficult day, that your husband is carrying a worry he has not explained, or that a favourite dessert will soften the evening. Care often lives in details. Nobody requests directly warming a plate. Remembering the preferred glass, cutting a child's portion smaller, saving a piece for someone arriving late. These gestures create home in the deepest sense, yet care becomes exhausting when it is expected to flow in one direction without interruption. Everyone at the table may depend on your attention, while assuming your own comfort is self-maintaining. You're asked whether there is more bread. Nobody asks whether you have eaten enough. This omission may not be cruel. It is often simply habitual, and habits can become more powerful than instructions because nobody thinks to question them. As dessert appears, the family relaxes. A simple pudding, canned fruit cake, or leftover pie can shift the mood from obligation to reward. The children become more cooperative. Your husband may lean back and loosen his posture, signalling that the difficult portion of the day has ended. For him, perhaps it has. You serve dessert while calculating the dishes it will add. A bowl-spoon plates and another round of crumbs join the kitchen's future. Still, the sweetness matters. It creates memory. Years later, the children may remember the smell of baked apples, or the pattern on the dessert dishes more clearly than the rules surrounding them. They may remember laughter, a father's story, a mother standing near the table. They may not remember how often she stood because sitting made it harder to reach what everyone needed. The table could also become the only place where the family was expected to appear together, which gave the meal both comfort and pressure. Private frustrations might remain unspoken to preserve harmony. Financial strain could hide behind generous portions. Marital tension could be postponed until after bedtime. A child's fear might be reduced to a reminder about manners because the adults lacked another language for it. The family looked complete while eating. An appearance itself could become reassuring. If everyone was seated, fed, and speaking politely, perhaps the household was fine. The meal did not solve every problem. It created a temporary border around them. For 30 minutes the plates were full, the room was warm, and the family could believe in its own stability. Then the ritual begins to dissolve. Your husband finishes first and reaches for the newspaper or moves toward the living room. The children ask to be excused, perhaps offering to carry one plate if the household expects it. Chairs scrape back. Napkins are left beside glasses. Someone promises to finish homework after a short rest. Within moments, the table that required careful arrangement becomes an abandoned field of crumbs, bones, serving spoons and half-empty cups. The family's comfort has been successfully delivered. They move into the evening carrying no dishes and little awareness of the transition. You remain seated for a few seconds after the others leave. The room is finally quiet enough to hear the clock again. This pause is not rest exactly. It is the interval between one form of labour and the next. You look at the table and see the whole meal in reverse groceries, preparation, timing, serving, conversation, correction, reassurance, and now clean up. The family table has fulfilled its purpose. Everyone has been fed, listened to, guided, and made comfortable. The evidence lies in the empty chairs. You stand, stack the first plates, and carry them toward the kitchen. In the living room, the radio or television begins. The children's voices drift down the hallway. Your husband settles into his chair, and the house enters the part of the evening most people will later remember as family time. At the sink, hot water begins to run. The quiet labour of keeping everyone comfortable is not finished. It has simply moved out of sight again. After-dinner dishes began at the exact moment everyone else decided the day was over. From the living room comes the low voice of the television, followed by a burst of canned laughter and the rustle of your husband unfolding the evening newspaper. The children argue over where to sit, then settle close enough to the screen to be warned about their eyes. In the kitchen you stand before a table covered with plates, glasses serving bowls, gravy streaks, crumbs, and the remains of 4 separate appetites. The room still smells of roasted meat, warm bread, dish soap, and the dessert that briefly convinced the children to behave like civilized guests. You carry the last dishes from the dining room, balancing them against your forearm while the family program begins without you. The opening music reaches the kitchen clearly. You recognize it. You may even enjoy the show, tonight, as on many nights. You will experience its first half through a doorway while scraping potatoes into the garbage. Cleanup begins with deciding what can be saved. Meat is wrapped in waxed paper or transferred into a covered dish. Potatoes may become tomorrow's hash vegetables, another side, and gravy the foundation of a meal that will be described as entirely new if nobody examines it too closely. Bread is returned to its container before it dries. Milk goes back into the refrigerator. Dessert must be covered before someone wandering through the kitchen later removes a piece without leaving enough to count as an official serving. Leftovers are not simply remains. They are future lunches, budget protection, and proof that the evening meal has not consumed more than the household can afford. You estimate portions while the family laughs in the next room. The sound is comforting, but it also marks the distance between their evening and yours. They are enjoying what dinner created. You are converting what dinner left behind into tomorrow's plan. Then the dishes enter the sink. Hot water runs over your hands, softening the skin already exposed to soap laundry, water cleaners and cooking throughout the day. Plates must be scraped, glasses rinsed, silverware gathered, and pans soaked before anything can be washed in a sensible order. The cleanest pieces go first, the greasiest last. A dishcloth moves across china, enamel, glass, and metal, while steam rises toward your face and loosens the hair repaired before 5 o'clock. Some households owned mechanical dishwashers, particularly those with newer kitchens and comfortable budgets. But most women still washed at least some dishes by hand, and even a machine required loading, unloading, scraping, and care. The promise of automation rarely extended to the moment when gravy hardened along the edge of a roasting pan. That remained a personal relationship between you hot water and a scouring pad. The work is familiar enough to become almost meditative. Wash, rinse, place in the rack. Wash, rinse, dry, return to the cupboard. Your hands know the sequence while your mind moves elsewhere. You listen to the program from the living room and reconstruct the missing scenes from fragments of dialogue. A character enters. The audience laughs. Your husband laughs a second later. One child asks a question and is told to be quiet until the commercial. During the advertisement, footsteps enter the kitchen. Someone wants water, another cookie, or confirmation that homework can wait until morning. You provide the answer, fill the glass, refuse the cookie, and remind the child that unfinished work has not developed better manners simply because television is on. The child leaves. Another wet glass joins the counter. Family leisure has the ability to generate dishes even while dishes are being removed. There is nothing inevitable about the wife washing alone. Some husbands dried plates, some children carried dishes, and some families treated cleanup as shared work. Yet the dominant middle-class ideal still assigned kitchen order to the woman who had planned and cooked the meal. A man might offer help and be praised for generosity. A woman performing the same work was simply completing dinner. The difference was not always cruelty or deliberate selfishness. Often it was a habit built from childhood advertising, workplace schedules, and assumptions about whose fatigue counted as the natural result of a job. Your husband may be genuinely tired. He may have spent the day commuting, answering to supervisors, and worrying about money. You understand this because understanding other people's exhaustion has become one of your responsibilities. Your own fatigue remains harder to display. The kitchen is inside the home, and work performed at home has a remarkable talent for disguising itself as the background of someone else's rest. The roasting pan resists. You leave it soaking, wipe the stove, and return to the dining table where crumbs have settled beneath the chairs and a drop of gravy has landed on the floor. The tablecloth may need shaking or spot cleaning. Napkins must be gathered. Chairs return to their places. Salt, pepper, and serving dishes go back into cupboards. The table is cleared not only because cleanliness matters, but because breakfast is already approaching. In less than 12 hours, the room must become another meal, another departure point, and another calm beginning. The evening reset prepares the stage for morning. Coffee should be checked. Bread must be sufficient. Lunch leftovers may need setting aside. The child's signed school note must remain visible enough not to disappear, though every visible object also threatens the impression of order. Tomorrow begins inside tonight's clean-up, which is why the work cannot simply be postponed without consequence. When the dishes are finally washed, the kitchen enters its second polished state of the day. Glasses stand upside down in the rack. Plates return to neat stacks. The counter shines beneath the overhead light. The stove is wiped, though one burner remains warm. You wring out the dishcloth, rinse the sink, empty the strainer, and sweep the most obvious crumbs from the floor. The room looks calm again, but your body no longer shares the effect. Your shoulders have tightened. Your feet ache inside the shoes chosen that morning to appear presentable rather than comfortable. The lipstick has faded. A small splash of water darkens the front of your dress. You glance toward the doorway and see your family gathered around the television, their faces illuminated by the shifting grey light. It is a warm scene. You may feel tenderness looking at it. You may also feel slightly excluded from the comfort you created. At last you carry a cup of coffee or tea into the living room and sit near the end of the program. Someone explains what you missed, usually in a way that removes all suspense. Your husband shifts to make room. A child leans against you, bringing the clean smell of soap or the less clean smell of an entire school day. For a few minutes you are part of the evening rather than its unseen support system. The family laughs. You laugh too. The house is warm, the dishes are finished, and the day seems almost gentle from this chair. These moments matter. They are often the moments people remember later. The television glow, a parent's familiar seat, the quiet safety of everyone being home. Then the closing credits begin, and the children must be sent upstairs. Teeth need brushing, pajamas must be found, clothes for tomorrow should be checked. One child suddenly remembers another assignment. Your husband turns a page of the newspaper. You set down the cup which has created one final saucer for the kitchen and rise again. The rest of the house has entered its evening. Yours is about to continue through bedtime mending ironing bills and the collection of tasks that waited patiently while everyone else relaxed. The evening did not end when the children went to bed. It simply became quieter, which made the remaining work easier to ignore from another room. Upstairs, one child asks for water. Another insists that a shadow near the closet has developed suspicious intentions, and both require a final reminder that tomorrow will arrive whether or not they cooperate with sleep. You straighten blankets, retrieve a dropped toy, listen to one last question, and close the bedroom doors until only narrow strips of hallway light remain. Downstairs, your husband settles more deeply into his chair with the newspaper, the radio, or the final television program of the night. The dishes are finished. The kitchen is clean. To anyone judging the household by its visible rooms, the day appears complete. Then you unfold the ironing board in the living room or dining area, place the basket beside it, and reveal the second evening hidden inside the first. Shirts, pillowcases, handkerchiefs, dresses and school clothes wait in a soft wrinkled pile. Everyone else is preparing for tomorrow by resting. You're preparing for tomorrow by making sure they can. Ironing is heat, moisture, pressure and repetition disguised as a quiet domestic skill. You test the iron, carefully adjust the cord and spread the first shirt across the board. The collar comes first, then the cuff sleeves back and front, each section arranged so that removing one wrinkle does not create two more elsewhere. Cotton may have been sprinkled earlier and rolled to hold the dampness evenly. Starch gives collars and cuffs the crisp finish expected in offices, schools, churches, and formal visits, but too much makes the fabric stiff enough to resist ordinary human movement. Too little leaves the shirt looking tired before the person wearing it has done anything to deserve the accusation. Steam rises into the lamplight. The iron moves forward, pauses and returns. A faint hiss follows each pass. Your husband's shirt becomes smooth beneath your hands, ready to support his public appearance at work. Tomorrow, someone may notice that he looks neat. Nobody will ask how late the ironing board remained open. The basket contains more than wrinkles. A child's sock has a thinning heel. A button is missing from a blouse. The hem of a dress has loosened, and a small tear near a pocket threatens to become a larger expense if ignored. You place the iron upright, open the sewing basket, and choose thread close enough in colour to disappear. Mending is an act of economy, but it is also an act of concealment. A good repair should extend the life of the garment without announcing that repair was necessary. The needle passes through fabric under the warm circle of the lamp, while the rest of the room remains dim. You reinforce the sock, secure the button, and fold the repaired clothing into the appropriate stack. Many women learned these skills from mothers' schools, home economics classes, relatives, or necessity. Some enjoyed sewing and could transform fabric into dresses, curtains, children's clothes, or gifts. Others performed only the repairs required to keep the household respectable. Either way, the family wardrobe depended on knowledge so ordinary that it was rarely treated as expertise. The household accounts wait beneath the sewing basket. Receipts from the grocery store, utility bills, installment payments, school expenses, church contributions, and a small collection of coins must be compared with the money remaining until payday. You clear a space at the table, sharpen a pencil, and open the notebook where the family's financial reality lives, in rows of modest figures. Your husband may earn the paycheck, but in many households the wife stretched it across food, clothing, cleaning supplies, transportation, children's needs, medical expenses, gifts and emergencies. The work demanded memory and prediction. Which bill could wait several days? How much meat remained in the refrigerator? Would the children need new shoes before the end of the month? Could the leaking tap become a repair next week, or would delay create a larger problem? Budgeting was not simply refusing expensive things. It was deciding which necessary thing could remain necessary a little longer. The numbers rarely behave with the cheerful simplicity promised by advertisements. The supermarket total was slightly higher than planned. The school has requested money for supplies. The church cookies will require sugar flour shortening and perhaps decorative ingredients that the committee will describe as inexpensive, because each woman is expected to purchase only her portion. Your husband's colleague may come to dinner, which means an ordinary meal must become a guest meal without revealing the financial transformation involved. You subtract, erase, recalculate, and move one purchase into the following week. A new dress for yourself disappears first because your current dresses still function, even if one has been altered twice, and another is beginning to shine at the seams. Personal spending often became the most flexible category precisely because the person controlling the household budget understood all the other consequences. The family's needs were fixed. Yours became adjustable. This financial work could create influence within the home, but it did not always create freedom. Some women managed household accounts confidently and made most daily purchasing decisions. Others received a fixed allowance, lacked access to larger financial information, or needed approval for major expenses. Banking practices, property laws, credit systems, employment, and family habits varied widely, but dependence remained a practical reality for many women whose labor produced no direct wage. You could manage every meal, garment, appointment, and bill while possessing little money clearly understood to be your own. The contradiction was subtle. The household trusted your judgment enough to prevent waste, but not always enough to treat domestic labor as economic contribution. You knew the price of nearly everything in the house. The price of your own time remained conveniently unlisted. Your husband may look over from the chair and ask whether the accounts balance. You say they will, which is technically true if nothing breaks. Nobody becomes ill, the car behaves. The children stop growing and the guest accepts a modest dinner. He may offer a suggestion, express concern, or remind you that money is tight, as though the notebook has not already communicated this in several columns. The conversation need not be hostile. He may carry genuine fear about keeping his job, paying the mortgage, or protecting the family's future. You may understand his pressure better than anyone. Still, his worry and yours occupy different shapes. He brings home the amount available. You must turn that amount into a month in which no one feels poor, hungry, embarrassed, or unprepared. Financial security is partly income. Domestic security is the daily performance of making income appear sufficient. By the time the final shirt is hung and the notebook closes, the house has become fully quiet. The iron is unplugged and left to cool. Repaired clothes rest in neat piles. Bills wait in envelopes. Tomorrow's lunches have already begun forming in your mind from tonight's leftovers. You return the sewing basket to its shelf, fold the ironing board, and carry the pressed clothes upstairs, careful not to crush the work you have just completed. In the bedroom, your husband may already be preparing for sleep. His shirt hangs ready for morning. The children's clean clothes wait in drawers. The house has been stocked, washed, polished, fed, organized and financially negotiated through another day. You sit on the edge of the bed and remove the shoes that have carried you from cold linoleum before sunrise to this final quiet hour. The marks they leave across your feet are more honest than the rooms downstairs. Nothing in the polished kitchen records your fatigue. Nothing in the smooth shirts records the heat of the iron. Nothing in the balanced notebook records what you postponed for yourself. The work has succeeded, which means it has become invisible once again. Soon the light will go out and the respectable housewife will finally be permitted to stop moving. But in the darkness, when no visitor, child, husband, advertisement or committee is watching, there remains one final question. The perfect household cannot easily answer, what did the woman maintaining all of it actually want? After the lights went out, the house finally stopped asking you to prove anything. The polished kitchen disappeared into darkness. The vacuum tracks upstairs could no longer be seen. The white shirt hanging near the wardrobe looked no more respectable than any other shape in the room. Beside the bed, the metal alarm clock continued its steady ticking, already measuring the distance to another morning. Your husband settles beneath the blankets. The children breathe quietly behind their closed doors. Pipes shift somewhere in the walls, the refrigerator hums downstairs, and a car passes beyond the curtains before the neighborhood becomes still again. For the first time since before sunrise, no one is requesting food, clothing, comfort, correction, attention, or an item that has vanished beneath a bed. You are lying down. The day is over. Yet your mind remains upright, walking through tomorrow's breakfast, the school note, the church cookies, the grocery budget, the guest dinner, and the shirt that must not be forgotten. The body has reached the mattress. The household manager is still making rounds. This was the hour when thoughts could appear without first receiving permission from the schedule. You might admit only to yourself that you were tired in a way sleep did not entirely solve. You might feel proud of the clean sheets, the children's completed work, the dinner everyone enjoyed, and the small financial decisions that kept the household steady. You might love the people sleeping around you with a tenderness so deep that much of the day's labor felt meaningful because it served them, and you might also wish that meaningful work did not require you to disappear inside it. These feelings were not mutually exclusive. Gratitude could live beside resentment. Love could live beside boredom. Domestic skill could live beside the desire to use other skills elsewhere. A comfortable house could feel safe and confining in the same evening. The public ideal preferred simpler emotions. The perfect wife was fulfilled, cheerful, grateful, and too well organized to wonder whether fulfillment should include more than being needed. Admitting dissatisfaction could be difficult because there was often no socially comfortable language for it. A woman with a healthy family, a dependable husband, modern appliances, and a suburban home might be reminded that she was fortunate. Often she was. Post-war prosperity gave many households security space, consumer goods, education, and possibilities earlier generations had wanted desperately. But gratitude did not prevent loneliness, and a washing machine could not answer a question about identity. If a woman felt restless, the problem might be interpreted as personal weakness. Poor adjustment, selfishness, nervousness, or failure to appreciate what she had. Medical and popular advice sometimes located unhappiness inside the woman, rather than inside the narrow role available to her. The home looked comfortable, so discomfort became difficult to explain. A person could stand in a bright kitchen filled with modern conveniences and still feel that her own life had been reduced to making convenience possible for everyone else. Not every housewife felt trapped, and no honest history should replace one idealized picture with another. Some women preferred homemaking, exercised real authority within their families, built rich community lives, pursued hobbies, volunteered, studied, created businesses from home, or found profound satisfaction in raising children and maintaining a household. Some marriages were companionate and generous. Some husbands cooked, cleaned, encouraged education, or treated household money as fully shared. Many women shaped domestic life with intelligence, humor, creativity, and a kind of practical power that formal histories often overlook. Others combined paid employment with nearly all the household work described today beginning before dawn and returning from a factory office, hospital, store, or school to start dinner. Race, class, region, religion, family structure, disability, and access to money changed the experience completely. The polished white suburban housewife seen in advertisements was never the whole decade. She was an influential image, and images can create pressure even when few real lives match them exactly. By the late 1950s and early 1960s, more women were beginning to describe the distance between the promised domestic ideal and their private experience, though the conversation did not begin with one book or one famous voice. It grew through letters, friendships, workplaces, colleges, political organizations, civil rights activism, labor movements, women's groups, and countless quiet recognitions that individual frustration might have a social cause. Betty Friedan's later work would become one highly visible part of that discussion, though her account reflected mainly the experiences of educated middle-class white women and did not represent every woman's reality. Black women, working-class women, immigrant women, and others had long confronted different combinations of paid labor, domestic responsibility, exclusion, and activism. The larger change came as private questions became harder to dismiss as private failures. What if exhaustion was not evidence that one woman was badly organized? What if boredom was not ingratitude? What if a person could love her family and still want education, wages, recognition, privacy, creative work, or a few hours that did not belong automatically to someone else? In the darkness of your reconstructed 1956 bedroom, none of those later arguments has arrived in complete form. Tomorrow still begins with the alarm. Breakfast still requires timing. The children still need clean clothes, and the household account will not be improved by historical perspective. But perhaps the quiet thought has already appeared. Perhaps you wonder what it would feel like to have work with a name or money understood to be yours, or an afternoon that did not require justification. Perhaps you simply want someone to notice how much knowledge the house consumes: nutrition, budgeting, stain removal, cooking, sewing, scheduling, child development, social diplomacy, emotional restraint, and the mysterious science of finding objects other people have misplaced. You do not need to reject the family to recognize the work. You do not need to hate the home to wish the home asked less of one person. The alarm clock continues ticking beside you, and now the whole long day can be seen in reverse. The cold linoleum before sunrise, the pin curls removed beneath the bathroom light, the eggs toast lunch boxes missing shoe breakfast dishes, wet laundry, polished furniture, unexpected visitor grocery aisles, 10-minute lunch committee calls, school papers, pressed collar, restored lipstick, timed dinner, crowded table, evening dishes, ironed shirts and penciled accounts. No single task seemed impossible. That was the secret. The day exhausted you through accumulation, through the constant exchange of one completed duty for another, and through the expectation that successful labor should leave no visible mark on the person performing it. You probably would survive a day as a 1950s housewife. The women who lived these routines survived thousands. The more honest question is what that survival required them to postpone, conceal, or quietly stop asking for. Now the old house can begin to fade. The refrigerator downstairs grows distant. The wall clock softens. The children's school books, the grocery list, the ironing board, and the carefully arranged breakfast table return to the darkness where we found them. The women who maintained homes like this were not smiling cardboard figures from advertisements. They were skilled, contradictory, resourceful people working within expectations that could offer pride and belonging while also narrowing their choices. Some accepted those expectations, some negotiated them, some resisted them, and many did all three at different moments of the same day. Their homes held warmth. Their work carried value. Their fatigue was real. You do not have to finish their list tonight. Let your own room become quiet again. Let the imaginary percolator stop bubbling. Let the last shirt remain unironed, and let the crumbs stay beneath the table until morning. Civilization will probably survive. The 1956 alarm clock can ring without you. The toast can take responsibility for its own temperature, and the refrigerator may continue humming with confidence, despite having accomplished very little personally. Pull the blanket higher. Allow the old suburban street to disappear and sleep well.